Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. How are we doing? So, we are going to jump right into it. We are about to finish up the trial of Nicole Nachtman. She is on trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder in the unaliving of her mom and stepfather. We are in the state's rebuttal case. We have gone through the state's case in chief, the defense's case in chief, and now we are in the rebuttal of the state. And we are listening to the forensic doctor lady give her analysis of Nicole's state of mind during these events. And y'all, it's spicy. It's spicy. And so that is what we are doing now. And then they're going to go into closing arguments, and then it will be the verdict, and that's it. Then we'll have to find something else to do. I have a couple true crime things lined up that I want to do until I find another trial that I'm interested in or maybe want to do. I don't know. Let me try to get this glare out of there. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into it. And if you are new here, welcome. Just a reminder, I am not an expert in any of this. I'm not a legal expert in any of this. I do not specialize in any particular area of educal. Clearly, I can't even speak the English. Good Lord. Okay. So no, I don't specialize in any of the legal mumbo jumbo. I am just here to go over some trials and do some things that might be interesting or entertaining and make my comments. And if you learn something, you learn something. If you don't, you don't. That's cool. But don't ever take anything that I say as fact, because most likely it's, can be proven wrong or could be proven wrong. Or maybe it is true and you learn something. But either way, anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Every subscription is greatly appreciated. Every like is even more appreciated. It's fantastic. So get in there and if you watch the video, even for a second, like it. So that's great. Okay, we're going to get right into it. And we're going to go right back into where we left off. Because she does not like, she got objected to. She doesn't like when the defense objects, which I don't blame her. So we're going to full screen this biatch. Closed captioning still on. Okay. And then move me down here into the corner. All right. And play.
We will take a break after the direct. The witness will come across.
So you mentioned things you've never seen. What other evidence did you see that would show that this person's not on psychotic regime?
Again, on that same line, not being able to do our own laundry, but can put the victim's clothing in the wash and clean his clothing.
What about as far as the moving of the car? Did Ms. Nachtman talk to you about that?
Yes.
Was that something that you think that a person who's suffering from a psychotic break would be have a rational mind to do?
No, she intentionally moved the car away so the mother would not see the car when she got home. And I asked her specifically about that, and she said that she didn't want her mother to get angrier if she saw the car still there. So that's why she moved the car. She didn't want her mother to see the car. That's what she told me. You know, once she completed the murder, she went up to school, told her roommate that she was there the previous day if anyone asked.
So what
After the
she's
murder, she
saying
met with
is
the police.
basically
There's no
somebody
evidence in the video that there was psychosis. She was in the here and now during the interview. She's answering questions.
if you watch the previous video, what she's saying is somebody in a psychotic state, or somebody, because the defense's doctors have stated that Nicole was in having a psychotic break, and she was having an episode, and that is why she can plead not guilty by reason of insanity, because at the time of the crime, she was having a psychotic episode. And what this lady is saying is no, she wasn't, because during this, she was able to do A, B, and C. If you are truly in or having a psychotic episode, you're not able to do A, B, and C, which makes sense. Because, you know, if you've ever dealt with anybody that has a severe mental illness, such as schizophrenia, and they are in a psychotic, if they're symptomatic, let's say, they can't think about these things rationally. There's not, I'm going to go hide my car so my mom doesn't see it. There's no, oh, let me pause, clean up the crime scene, fax this sheet back to the school so I get my dorm room, and wait here until my mom gets home and kill her. It's very erratic. Their mind, it's what do they call it? Disorganized thoughts. That's what like you can't pick out a thought. You have a lot racing thoughts. They have a lot of things going on. That's why if you ask them, what are you thinking? And they'll be like, I don't know. Because they're thinking about a whole lot, but they cannot pinpoint or pick out a specific thing. So, yeah. Okay.
Questions. Yes, she's talking about things that she likes, but she knows she's not going to speak with them about the crime, and she's just holding conversation. She's talking about something that's particular of interest to her. It was not any odd conversation. She was in the here and now. They would ask her questions. She would answer. She'd be polite about it. She'd be able to ask her, make her needs known. This was not an issue. This is not schizophrenia. And then in jail medical records from right after the murders, they do not indicate any evidence of psychosis. She talked about the screaming there. They did not give her a diagnosis of schizophrenia. That alone, even if she continued with the screaming, although she told me something different, that is not consistent with hallucinations that are consistent with schizophrenia. And the jail staff knew that, and they didn't give her diagnosis or medication for that. So that's why I say that she did not have psychosis at the time of the crime.
All right, going back to specifically whether or not she knew what she was doing, what evidence that you gleaned from this, from your interviews with Ms. Nachtman, that will show you that she knew what she was doing at the time of these murders?
In her interview with me, she told me that she shot and killed Bob instead of killing herself, that she knew that killing Bob was wrong, that she shot Bob once in the head, and that she knew that she killed him, and that when she thought when somebody would hear that loud noise, the police would get called and they would come there. She knew that if her mother didn't want to kill her now, like I told you, she'd be justified in killing now because Bob was dead. Another thing, when she told Joseph on the phone after this had happened and she was admitting to him the crime, she said to him, I didn't think I could do it, but I did. That was when she killed Bob. That's how she described that. She told her brother goodbye. She hugged David goodbye, one last hug, because she knew that the consequences of her actions were that she was going to be taken away from them for a long time due to this. She told Joe on the phone that she was going to miss him. Well, she knew she was going to be gone after this. She told me that she was going to be on the run after this, that she'd need a false ID or passport because she'd be stopped from leaving the country because she'd be wanted for this crime. She knew that using a gun on someone and shooting them in the head would result in her death because she talked about shooting herself in the head to kill herself right before she did this, right before she killed the other two
Well, why
victims and
didn't
shot
the
them
other
in the
people
head.
mention this?
She knew that.
Those are evidence she knew what she was doing. What about the consequences portion of this?
Well, the consequences of that we already sort of discussed in terms of being gone and not being back.
And what about that she knew that it was wrong?
Well, there was evidence that to show that she knew that the murders were wrong, not only because she told me that, but also the actions that Nicole took to cover up the murders.
Here we go.
Right before this was doing searches on her phone for dangerous areas in Tampa and people in low places looking for someone to help her after she did this.
Did she explain to you what that meant?
Yes, looking for people that are what she perceived to be shady to be able to help her with this, to be able to help her get a fake ID or a passport because she knew that she couldn't use her own ID after she had done this because she'd be wanted and that people would know who she was. She told her family she was leaving for school on the 19th. So she was going to be gone before her mom was killed. She told her mother that she was in college, told her about her roommates, let her mom think that she was up there in school when she knew that she was at home.
So while she was at home, she had communication with her mother?
Yes, she had communication with her mother and talked to her about her roommates and things like that, that she was up at school and she told her about her roommates. Her mom asked her about her roommates and she talked with her about that.
But she hadn't met her roommates yet, had she?
No, but she was telling her mom that because she didn't want her mom to know that she was there waiting for her at her home. She moved the car distance from her home so her mother wouldn't know she was there. She cleaned the crime scene with bleach, washed the victim's clothing in the washing machine. She moved the body to the back room and locked the door. Once she killed her mother, she ran to her car almost 2 miles away and disposed of the murder weapon, which the police have never found. She told me that she threw it away because it was not a good idea for her to have a gun, that 2 people had already been shot, and she didn't want anyone else to get hurt. So again, she knew that. She drove up to the school, told each of her roommates a different story.
Yes.
For the record.
You want to approach?
You were saying something about her driving to school?
No, yeah, she drove up to school, told each of her roommates a different story about her mother. One roommate, she told her mother was dead. One roommate, she told her mother was in the hospital. She told her brother a story about the murders, though she admitted that she did it. She didn't give a true account of it. She said that she went back up to school and got a sign and then came back to kill her mother because now it's the right thing to do because these signs gave her that impression that it was the right thing to do. She told her Uncle Eric she had nothing to do with the crime, nothing to do with the deaths. Nicole told me that the crime that she did was serious and how the context of this was because she told me when her mom called her about the roommates, she couldn't tell me the exact conversation about the roommates because of the seriousness of the crime. She was focused on that and not on what her mom was talking about. She told me that she was going to Tallahassee temporarily because she knew the police were coming for her because she knows that she knows that someone saw her shoot her mother in the driveway. So she knew that someone saw her. So she knew the police were coming after her because she knew someone knew. And then on the way up there, she was listening to the news to see what was going on because she knew that she committed a crime that was newsworthy because she killed 2 people. So all of those things told me that she knew that the murders were wrong.
Now, why would she tell this lady all of this,
Absolutely.
but not the other 2? Or she did,
We're
and
going to take our afternoon break. It'll be about a 15
they
minute
just
break.
didn't
I will instruct you not to
say
discuss
that.
the case yourself or with anyone else, not to do any research related to the case, and avoid all exposure to the case outside of the courtroom. All rise for the jury.
Oh no.
Jury is present, seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome back. Did anyone have any discussions about the case, do any research about the case, or was anyone exposed to any reports about the case during the last break by show of hands? Let the record reflect there are no hands. Thank you all. We're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to turn to the cross-examination. Ms. Holmes is ready to proceed. Yes, sir. You may. One of them.
I just want to make sure that that was the right one that I was
Right
on.
thing to do. She told her Uncle Eric she had nothing to do with the crime.
Case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, not to do any research related to the case, and avoid all exposure to the case outside of the courtroom. All rise for the jury.
Okay, so we're on the right one.
Jury is present, seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome back. Did anyone have any discussions about the case, do any research about the case, or was anyone exposed to any reports about the case during the last break by show of hands? Let the record reflect there are no hands. Thank you all. We're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to turn to the cross-examination. Ms. Holmes is ready to proceed.
Yes, sir.
You may.
Good afternoon, Uncle Andrew. How are you?
Good afternoon, Attorney Holtz. I'm doing all right.
Now, you've had an opportunity to work on criminal cases in the forensic area, as you stated on cross, and it's primarily in the 5th Circuit, which is Ocala, the 6th Circuit, which is Pinellas Pasco, and then, of course, the 13th Circuit, which is Hillsborough County, correct?
Yes,
And you've been doing that probably since about 2008, is that correct?
correct.
All right, and since approximately 2008, your criminal casework with the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office has probably brought you in the general area of about $480,000 in income, is that correct?
You know better than me.
Okay, so we recently took your deposition and we covered these things, so if you don't
Okay.
mind just answering the question, and you just recently testified in another court proceeding, so if you don't mind just answering the question. That's correct, we've covered this with you.
You have said that before. Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I believe what you're telling me.
Okay, and overall, as a matter of fact, with the state of Florida testifying for the state attorney's offices, you've made over $700,000 since 2008, correct?
Yes.
All right, now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your CV, which of course is your background and some of your work. If I understand your CV correctly, and do you have a copy of that?
So that's from
No.
2008.
What's in your head?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think you worked at the Tampa VA hospital for about 3 years, 2004, July to about June of 2007. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
All right, and then from July of 2005, which would have been kind of a layover, to May of 2007, you also worked at the Bay Pines VA hospital. Is that correct?
Yes.
So about 2 years.
Yes.
That's something that when you're a resident, they allow you to do. It's kind of like you called it, I think, moonlighting. Is that correct?
Yes.
In 2006, July to about 2006 of December, so for about 6 months, you were working with Premier Community Healthcare. And again, this kind of goes through that same time period that we're talking about, 2004 to 2007, correct?
Correct.
And basically at that time, you were seeing Medicaid patients. And you only stayed there for about 6 months because you said that you wanted to see patients for a lot longer than they were willing to have you see them. Is that correct?
That's one of the reasons. Yes.
And then you also worked at Union Correctional from March of 2007 to April of 2007, which is about a month. Is that correct?
Yes. I worked there.
Okay, so just to put it into perspective, from 2008 to 2019, which is when this trial took place, I mean, she threw out a big number, which was 700,000. Really is only roughly about 63,000 a year for her services, and she's an accredited doctor and whatnot. So, I mean, it's not that, I mean, whatever. You get paid for your services for whatever you do. Now, did she get bribed or whatever for the things and get paid to say the things? I mean, her testimony seems more valid and more to the point and understandable than the other two. So, don't be a hater because they got a better expert than you.
During different breaks and holidays in my schedule. Yes.
And when you talk about being the chief psychiatrist for the Department of Corrections, what you're really talking about is you're the chief psychiatrist for one of the dorms that's there. They have an overall person that oversees all of their medical and psychiatric needs, and you would have just been the chief psychiatrist for a dorm, correct?
Correct.
All right, and then in 2007, again, for about a month, you worked at Zephyr Hills Correctional, and there you left because you had documented that you thought one of the inmates was having sex with a guard, and you felt like someone had hired someone to harm you. Is that correct?
I was told that. Yes.
And then from May of 2007 to June of 2007, again, you worked at the Polk County Jail. That's again for about a month. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were covered at that time for someone's maternity leave.
Yes.
And then again, February of 2008, you go to Union Correctional again. Is that
Yes.
correct?
I toggled between those units. Yes.
And again, when you say you were chief psychiatrist there, again, it was for a dorm where someone else was overseeing the entire complex.
Correct. Yes.
And then the same thing in May of 2008, again for a month, and you're saying that you're going back and forth to places, correct?
That's right.
2008 of May to June of 2008, again for about a month, you worked for Health Integrated, and there you were a consulting psychiatrist, and you were processing insurance and things of that sort. Is that correct?
I was doing insurance reviews. Yes.
So at that point in time, you really weren't seeing patients or treating patients. Would that be fair to say?
No, that's not fair to say.
And I'm talking about only during that 1 month.
Which month was it?
Okay. May of 2008 to June of 2008, when you were the consulting psychiatrist, but your primary duties were insurance processing.
Right. But I was still in my fellowship at that time. So during the fellowship, I was treating patients for USF, but I was not in my private practice yet. Correct.
And then July of 2008 to January of 2010, you end up going for Health Integrated, and in your opinion there, you were terminated for whistleblowing because you didn't want to provide treatment to Scott and Mike's president's child. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
And you did not testify to that in the Duke's case?
I did not say that I did not want to provide care for this person. What I said was that the president of the company's child, they were trying to get him in a special clinic that was very expensive, but he hadn't really done the outpatient treatment, the lower level of treatment yet. And so that was that was why I was terminated, because I didn't approve this for a special person, because I didn't think he was a special person as opposed to every other person.
And you were
Yes.
operating under the whistleblowing at the time, is that correct?
I don't know what operating under the whistleblowing was, but
You did not use that terminology.
I did use that terminology, but I don't know what you mean by operating.
All right, you used the terminology in the Duke's trial that you in fact were terminated for whistleblowing. Let me ask it that clearly. Yes?
I believe, yes, that's the case.
All right, thank you. July of 2008 to April of 2014, you were at Tampa General Hospital, is that correct?
Yes,
About 5.5 years?
yes,
Wasn't a regular fee. You were an attending psychiatrist. They would call you if they needed you, is that correct?
that's correct. Yes, I would teach residents and things there, yes.
And during that time period, you really couldn't work there in an employee type of status because you didn't have a board certification as was required, correct?
No,
Were you board certified from July of 2008 through April of 2014?
April 2014. Yes,
In March of 2009 to May of 2009, again, you were the chief psychiatrist for Dormant Union Correctional, and that's for 3 months, is that correct?
yes,
Then March of 2010, you were working at Family Preservation Services as a psychiatrist, again, for Medicaid patients, that's for 1 month.
yes,
And were you terminated there because you would not prescribe opiates and benzos to patients?
yes. They were diverting medications, and I had been taking people off of those medications so they could not divert those medications. And that was decreasing the amount of patients that they were seeing in the clinic, so I was terminated, yes.
Now, at some point, and you can go with me in terms of the dates, but would it be fair to say that in about 2013, you started working with JSA Health Telepsychiatry as a telepsychiatrist?
That sounds right, yes.
And would you tell the jury and the court what that means in terms of telepsychiatry?
What I do in telemedicine, I still do that in my own practice now, but what that means is I was seeing patients over the computer. So they would have a clinic in an underserved area.
What you see,
They would have a
what
staff
you do
there,
now.
and then I would be seeing the patients, and I would have a staff there. So if they needed labs or anything like that, that staff at the center could be doing that under my direction. Yes,
And you did that for JSA as well as for healthcare services, the Center for Healthcare Services and North Texas State Hospital. Does that sound right?
yes, that's correct.
North Texas State Hospital was for about 4 months from October of 2013 to February of 2014. Is that correct?
Yes,
And the Center for Health Services would have been about June 2013 to March of 2015, a little bit under 2 years.
yes, that's right.
Now, are all of these under the auspices of JSA by any chance?
Perfect, yes.
And then March of 2015 to September of 2017, again, telepsychiatry outpatient for the not guilty by reason of insanity clinic. That was for about 2.5 years. Does that sound correct?
Yes, it does.
And then in 2016, you worked for Health Integrated doing some behavioral health clinic education for about a month. Is that correct?
In 2016,
Is that right, March?
I actually did that for years. I just finished that. They hired me back after I had my first set of twins. I believe it was February of 2015. And I worked there in that capacity up until recently when the company got sold to another company.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, in March of 2016, were you the behavioral health clinic education consultant for Health Integrated? Is that what your duties were during that 1 month?
Yes, then I moved up. Yeah.
And then after that, would it be fair to say that you became the medical director, not doing insurance review or teaching or anything, the medical director?
No, I was doing teaching, but I just moved up in terms of position to medical director instead of just a consultant. Yeah.
Now, you also have what you call your private practice, which is under the name of La Coupe, and is that right, La Coupe?
LaCoupe, yeah.
La Coupe, okay. June of 2008 to the present time, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and you used to have a physical office, and now you primarily do your private practice through telepsychiatry, is that correct?
That's
And
exactly
if you
right.
have to see a patient, you do so at Hudson at your husband's sign company, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then in October of 2017, did you become engaged in some way with Tony Healthcare Consulting?
Yes.
And what did you do with them?
Well, I haven't really done anything with him yet. He hired me so that way I could do insurance reviews, but I haven't done any with him yet.
And you yourself in your personal in your personal psychiatry, do not take insurance, is that correct? You do personal pay.
That's right, self-pay. Mhm.
And your practice is primarily like 75% telepsychiatry, 25% forensics, basically. Does that sound about right?
In terms of my time, yes.
Now, you also have both personal and business Facebook accounts, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
And you happen to be someone who actually uses your Facebook accounts for business purposes, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
All right. And you know that this case started July 22nd of 2019, which was 9 days ago or so. Is that correct?
Could you just repeat that?
You know that this case started on July 22nd of 2019, which is about 9 days ago. And you would know that because you would have received a subpoena from the state of Florida putting you on notice to be here, to be available for the 2 weeks that this case was set. Is that correct?
Yes, it's gone longer than I was subpoenaed for.
And On the night before jury selection, did you post a photograph of Ms. Nachtman dressed in orange with a statement that said, "Let's do it"?
Yeah, it was an article that my name was in.
I'm sorry, "Let's do this."
Yes,
Is that it? Or you posted it, is that fair?
yes.
And what did you mean by that?
Start working.
And you realized that this case, you were advised that this case was going to have media attention, is that correct?
I was.
And you then, yesterday, came into the courtroom, as an expert is allowed to do so, to listen to the testimony of Dr. Heidi and potentially Dr. Ewing,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
And you posted again at that time that you were here and you were working, is that correct?
yes,
And then you did the same thing again today, is that correct?
yes,
Right, and you indicated on your direct testimony, Mr. Terry, that you have a medical license, is that correct?
yes.
Right, and you understand it's a professional license, just as being a lawyer is a professional license, right? And yes?
I don't know what lawyers have. I just know we have those.
And you also practice in the area of psychiatry, so you actually realize that psychiatry is also a profession, correct?
Yes,
And you realize that when you post to Facebook, that brings in and draws comments, is that correct?
it does.
Now, one of the things I want to ask you about is over the 3 days that you interviewed our client for approximately 14 hours, you had a tendency to interject your personal experiences in life into those interviews. For instance, you made a comparison to having had a roommate that was similar to Nicole Nachtman's experiences. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you had, in trying to talk to Nicole Nachtman about her poor self-esteem of herself and how she saw herself negatively, and how she felt about the liposuction and being 5'2" and weighing 132 pounds and all those things. You talked about that you've got sisters that are small, short, and they still got married. So you do have a tendency to do that, correct?
I don't understand what you mean. They still got
You have a
married.
tendency to interject your personal family life or your personal experiences into the 14 hours of interviews with Ms. Nachtman.
I always do that. Yep, I do that generally. Yep,
So, and you would confirm that
You
did
were
that
late.
also with Nicole Nachtman, correct?
yes.
All right, forgive me for having to ask this question, but unfortunately, it is what it is. You yourself are a victim of sexual
Wait,
abuse.
time out.
Ah.
He's standing for an objection. Legal, you may approach.
And again, forgive me for having to ask the question.
Don't ever do that. Just
But
ask.
You're not gonna forgive me, is that?
I'm saying you don't have to qualify. Just ask me. I don't have any problem with any questions you ask me.
You yourself are a victim of physical and verbal abuse at the hands of your biological father,
Of my parents, yeah.
at both your parents.
Yeah.
And you, at the time that this occurred, and physical and or verbal occurred throughout your childhood and almost to the day that you finally left and went to college at the age of 18, is that correct?
Yes,
And during that time period, you did not report to law enforcement or to DCF or anything of that sort, correct?
that's correct.
And sometimes this verbal abuse and or physical abuse did not have outward signs to other people, is that correct?
Certainly. Yep,
And you also did not seek any treatment during that time period, is that correct?
that's correct.
And your parents also did not help you move from home to college, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you really didn't know that that was anything kind of out of the ordinary until you were at the college area and kind of saw everybody else's parents seem to be doing these things, correct?
That's right.
Let me now.
It's not out of the ordinary.
Trying to get a little bit of understanding.
Not everybody has
of
that.
the organizations that you belong to. As we sit here today, are you a member of the American Psychiatric Association?
No,
And you are, however, a member of the American Medical Association, is that correct?
no, the Florida Medical
Florida
Association.
Medical, okay. Is that a voluntary kind of association where you pay a membership and you belong and you have, the qualification has to be that you're a doctor?
They're all voluntary. Yeah,
So the American Psychiatric Association, however, is the one association that handles board certification, which you in fact have had in the past here in the United States.
I have been board certified and I am board certified in the United States.
And they handle the board certification, is that correct? That whole process, they regulate it.
The American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology does that. I don't
Okay.
believe that it's APA. I don't know that it is. I don't know their affiliation. I just know it's American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology.
The American Psychiatric Association is also publishes the nationally recognized Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is that correct?
Yes,
And it's the same book that Dr. Ewing showed today, and you have, I think, the hard copy, is that you have?
yes.
Hard copy.
It's a hard copy.
And just to give the jury a feel and an understanding, because I know that everybody has said what it is intended for, but if you don't mind
No problem.
following me,
No problem. Where are you?
I'm shifting you over to page 5, the introduction,
Excellent.
just to make sure that you're comfortable with my questions.
Totally.
Now, the fifth edition, which is what we're looking at, what that was really a 12-year massive undertaking that involved hundreds of people working towards a common goal. And that was intended to come up with reliable diagnoses that were essential for guiding treatment recommendations, identifying prevalence rates for mental health servicing planning, identifying patient groups for
I
clinical.
love how
research,
she's trying to
documenting
school
important public health information.
the
Is that correct?
doctor.
So we would have been in paragraphs 1 and 2.
Okay, you're blending things.
Well,
Yeah, I know it. I mean, I've never really read the introduction so you're introducing me to something new, but yes, that's what it says here.
well, I think you can agree with me that this is something that took a number of years, and it wasn't just put together by psychiatrists, that in fact, it was everybody, a lot of people had input into this. And if you go to page 6, for instance, the paragraph.
Is that her first set of twins? How many sets of twins do you have? I just caught that.
Physicians, of which
I'm a
you
little-
are one,
Yes.
correct?
Check.
And I don't mean that you're one that provided input, but you're a physician.
Correct.
Psychologists, social workers, nurses, counselors, epidemiologists, statisticians, neuroscientists, and neuropsychologists. And in fact, patients, families of patients, lawyers, consumer organizations, and advocacy groups have all been able to participate in some way in providing feedback on mental disorders, correct?
Yes, that's what it says here.
And so.
That doesn't mean
well,
it's
you had
true.
to debate with that, correct? That was an opportunity that was afforded.
I don't have any idea. I didn't know that they talked with patients, and I don't know exactly how they participated in the development of this. I don't know if it was just the research or what. So I really don't know. It's just saying a conglomeration of people had helped to put this together, basically. Okay.
Which is good. It's a wide array of people. It's all kinds of people that are affected by mental illness, by mental disorders, by treatment, all kinds of things. That's a good.
Are you going to try to
That's a good
make the
type of
DSM-5
representation. Fair
invalid?
enough to say? Okay.
Yes.
Now, the other thing is that it's very clear that you need clinical training and experiences in order to determine a diagnosis. Is that true?
Yes.
As it relates to your feelings about the American Psychiatric Association, I believe that you have testified previously, if I'm correct, that you believe that the American Psychiatric Association is built more around politics.
Yes.
Now, but at the same time, you certainly recognize that this is the book that is nationally recognized. And in fact, not only have you relied upon it, but so has Dr. Ewing. And so the reality of it is the book stands as really the #1 nationally accepted place to look for disorders, how to diagnose them, and how to treat them, correct?
Yeah, it's a guideline.
Now,
Yeah,
and if you,
that's all it is. That's all anything is a guideline.
you are also at this
It's
time
recognized by
one of
the
two
DSM-5.
one of 2 individuals who has filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois in March of
Wait, there's an
2019.
objection, approach.
She doesn't want to stop in the middle of her talking.
Now, you previously testified that you administered the SIMS screening instrument to Nicole Nachtman, correct?
Oh,
Correct.
she
And you
lost
did this
whatever
on the
she
third
was trying to say.
evaluation Of Nicole Nachtman, right at the very beginning of the evaluation, correct?
Yes.
Right, and as you indicated previously in your testimony with Mr. Terry, the instrument comes with very specific instructions that you, as the person who's administrating it, must follow. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a true false test. Yes.
Well, the manual says that you have to read the instructions on the test to the person who you are administering the test to, correct?
I don't know that it says that, but I don't mind that it says that. I did give their instructions, and that's it.
What you read to us earlier today on
Yes.
direct examination by Mr. Terry is the instructions that you, by the manual, are supposed to read to the person who is taking the test, correct? I'm sorry, the instrument.
I didn't know that I had to read it exactly like that, and I couldn't just use my own words. I didn't know that.
And yet you testified that you administered this SIMS test for, to numbers, I can't remember now what you said, significant numbers of individuals, correct?
Yes, in my fellowship, and I was trained in it. And at no time was I ever told that I had to read these direct verbatim instructions rather than just tell the person, this is a true false test, answer true false. If you have any questions, please let me know, and fill out the top part.
Doctor, are you testifying here today that you did not read the manual that is provided to you as a psychiatrist, as well as the SIMS instrument itself? You yourself are testifying today that you have not read the manual and you do not follow the instructions of the manual verbatim?
I bought
Is
the
that your
manual.
testimony, ma'am?
No, I bought the manual. I purchased the manual. I read the manual, but I didn't read the part in the manual where it said I had to read these exact instructions to say answer true and false. No, I did not do that.
And you, okay, so you didn't read the manual and then.
I did read the manual.
And and you did not follow the manual's directions then as it relates to the third evaluation of Ms. Nachtman when you administered the test. Is that correct?
I did not read this exact instruction to her, no. I
Matter
did
of
not.
fact, what did you say to her?
I said, Nicole, this is a true false test. I want you to answer true and false. If you have any questions about this, please mark next to it so that way I'll know. And please fill out the top portion.
If I show you, and this is just a refresher recollection, so
Sure.
please don't read it.
Please don't read
Just
it.
read to myself. Is that what you just said?
Okay, just read to yourself this part that I've highlighted for a moment.
Okay.
And see if that helps to refresh your recollection as to what it is that you actually said to Ms. Nachtman before you asked her to take the test.
This is part of what I said, but yes. There's more on another page. That's just one part. But
So I'll show you another page.
sure.
Find mine again for it.
You don't need to ask.
And so, Mr. Terry, it's pages 2 and 3. I think you read both of them, but I think you need to read the answer. Okay, does that help refresh your recollection as to what you literally actually said to her?
Yes, this is what I just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you would have said it's a true false test. You just circle true or false. I want you to fill out this top information. It's got your name, the date of birth, your age, and then just go through and answer each of the questions. And she says yes. She said okay. And then you said, if you have any questions about one of the questions, you can ask me. But I also, when you have a question or you're like sort of on the fence or whatever, even though I want you to answer true or false, if you sort of have a question or are on the fence about something, just make some kind of note on the side, like a little line or circle that numbers. Right?
Well, I don't know what that meant right there,
I
but
don't either.
but
Those were your words, correct?
yes, and I believe I continued a little bit too. Did I not continue or not?
Because I'm going to check this while I'm eating lunch.
Okay.
That's where you, so those were the instructions you actually gave Ms. Nachtman on that day, which is certainly shorter and different than the instructions that the manual suggests, correct?
I think it's actually longer than the manual.
Okay, we'll let the jury.
Okay.
So since it's really a screening tool, it's certainly not a test. It's nothing more than a tool, and you're aware of that. Is that correct?
It's a screening tool. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the SIMS has shown clearly to you that Ms. Nachtman was not malingering in either psychosis or in low intelligence, correct?
Correct.
And a part
Where are
of
you
what
going?
the manual says very clearly is that the SIMS is the appropriate instrument for the screening of malingering psychiatric and cognitive complaints in a wide range of contexts, subject to certain limitations, correct?
Yep.
And those limitations include that the diagnosis of malingering should not be based on SIMS findings in isolation, correct?
That's right.
And that if the results suggest malingering, based on whether it's the cutoff scores or perhaps what your observations were, then whoever's using this instrument needs to continue with extensive evaluation of malingering, correct?
Correct.
And that should then be made, the determination of malingering should be made in the context of a comprehensive evaluation only where multiple sources of data have been used in order to corroborate the classification, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that would include things like the psychosocial and the psychiatric and medical history, correct?
Correct.
Oh no.
That's correct. We're talking about corroborating
Have the
data.
manual with you by any chance?
No, I don't.
Well, I believe you were in here today when Dr. Ewing was testifying, and he indicated that that is what the manual says. So we need to disagree with the opinion of Dr. Ewing.
Well, I believe that they're talking about when you make an assessment of malingering, you do a full psychiatric evaluation, which I did 14 hours. You also do that screening instrument, and then you look at collateral sources of information, which I gave approximately 30 different sources. So you use all that information together to then support your opinion. Yes, I did that.
Okay, well, all of the experts that have testified have seen all the same exact documentations and sources of data that you have. The question here becomes, that instrument is not to be used in isolation from other psychological instruments. Is that not true?
I don't
And is
believe that
not
that's
what
true.
The manual says,
I don't believe that that's true.
and you got the manual with you today.
No.
Now, before meeting Nicole Nachtman, and before your interviews of Nicole Nachtman this year in 2019, you clearly had received a lot of sources of data. You reiterated them all to Mr. Terry on direct, correct?
Correct.
And that included that you either had read all of those sources of data that you received, as well as actually speaking with individuals personally. Is that correct?
I didn't do all of that before I saw her. Some of the information I received after I saw her.
So of the 30 sources of data, and I'll have to go through them, I guess, one by one, of when you received them and when you reviewed them. Your clinical interview with the defendant occurred on 3 separate occasions. So if we can agree on that, it was April 30th of 2019,
Yes.
from 9 in the morning until 4 p.m. with a break at 11:45. Does that sound right?
Yes.
May the 15th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. with a break again.
Yep.
Probably a lunch break, correct?
I was lactating, so that was what I did during that time.
And Ms. Rosie and Ms. Nachtman went to lunch. Is that correct?
Correct.
And on May 28th from 9 a.m. to noon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on April 30th. being
I was
the first day,
lactating, so that's what I
had
did
you
at that time.
point in time received and reviewed the records for Nicole Nachtman, the geomedical records.
Yes. Let me assist you, Attorney Holt. I would say that I had everything up to number 24 by the time I evaluated Nicole. I got 25 forward after.
All right, and so as to not, because we're not sharing this list
Sorry.
with the jury, that's okay, and with the court, let me, and you follow along with me. So you
Yes.
received the deposition of Jacqueline Roman that was dated January 29th, 2018, after your evaluation of Nicole.
Yes.
However, the police reports that you had read included an interview of Ms. Roman earlier on, more closer in time to the 2015, correct?
Yes.
All right, the deposition of Taylor Bronson dated October the 3rd of 2017. You received that after your interviews. However, you had also read an interview of Taylor Bronson in the law enforcement documentation that you received, correct?
I don't remember that actually.
The deposition of Laura Hessmer dated December 13th, 2017. You received that after your evaluations. However, Laura Hessmer was in fact interviewed by law enforcement in close proximity to the incidents, correct?
Yes.
And then the deposition of Jeffrey Hartman dated December 13th, 2017. Again, you've indicated that you received that after the evaluation.
You've been to Canada.
However, you did have an interview of Mr. Hartman from the previous reports or not?
I don't remember his either.
The crime scene diagram, you're indicating that you received that after?
Correct.
The evaluations also?
Yes.
And as to the telephonic interview that you had with Miriam Laird, you did that on July 10th of 2019, approximately 12 days prior to the jury selection process, correct?
I haven't related it to the jury selection process, but it was on July 10th.
And you've previously testified, as a matter of fact, your deposition was about 10 days prior to July 22nd. So yours was about what, July 12th, I think? About 10 days prior to us starting here.
Okay.
And in that deposition, you indicated that you really felt that what Miriam Lear did during her deposition was she kind of glossed over things a lot. As a matter of fact, she's 88 years old. Let me start with that. She's 88 years old, correct?
During my interview, you mean?
No.
You said the deposition, so
Well, when we deposed you on her interview, you
Correct.
indicated that she kind of glossed over things of how they occurred, correct?
in my estimation, yes, I would say that.
That's not unusual because you're talking about her daughter that's now deceased, correct?
Right. I think that that's her general nature to do that.
And you're, so during the time period that you are evaluating Nicole, you had the benefit of Dr. Heidi's 54-page report, correct?
Oh, yes.
And you also had the defendants, which is filed by the attorneys, of the notice of intent to rely upon the defense of insanity, correct?
Correct.
And you've indicated to Mr. Terry that you testified before on the issue of insanity in the past, correct?
Yes.
You've indicated that you're familiar with the definition of, well, the criteria for insanity as well as the jury instruction for insanity, correct?
I don't know about the jury instruction. I just know the criteria. If what you guys have been presenting this whole time is jury instruction, then I would say yes.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I didn't have any knowledge of that.
So in all the cases that you had testified to previously involving insanity, you had never seen the jury instruction before? Is
That's
that
correct. Yes.
So today, when Mr. Terry showed it to you, would be the first time that you were aware of it?
Yes.
Okay. And you also were in a position and had already had the benefit of reviewing not only the Air Academy school records, but literally also school records from the 3rd grade where another psychological evaluation occurred within the school, correct?
Yes.
And you also had the ability to look at Ms. Nachtman's transcript of grades from FSU, correct?
Yes.
And you had also been able to look at the state of Florida Department of Children and Family reports, as well as an extensive family law court file, correct?
Yes.
And would it be fair and accurate to say that the state of Florida Department of Children and Family reports, as well as family court file, displayed and clearly, they made clear to you that there had been a lot of volatility and a lot of hostility and a lot of contentious litigation between Nicole Nachtman's biological father and her biological mother, Miriam Perez.
Yes, ma'am.
And you also had, in the benefit of the psychological evaluations of Nicole's parents through the family court file, as well as the psychological evaluations of Nicole over her from the age of 3 to the Air Academy, you had an opportunity to look at psychological evaluations for her also, correct?
Yes.
And you also had the benefit of the actual deposition that was taken by Mr. Terry of Dr. Ewing. And so you had all of that information available to you, and you could review it when you went to the evaluations, correct?
No, I didn't get Dr. Ewing's deposition transcript until the day before the deposition in this case. And if you say it was the 12th, then I would say it was the 12th. So that was way after I saw Nicole.
So everything other than Dr. Ewing's that we talked about, you had the benefit of reviewing.
You had said something right before that I didn't know that I had either. Right before that, but I don't remember what it was.
Psychological evaluations of
I did have
Nicole, her biological parents.
Yes.
When I say psychological evaluations of Nicole, I'm talking about from the family court file
Yes,
from 3rd grade,
yes,
and then the counseling aspect from Air Academy, correct? You had all of that available.
yes, I did.
Now, you would agree with me that you, based on your training and education and all of the testimony that you've given in this courtroom today, as well as in all the other cases that you've handled, that you know what to look for in terms of a diagnosis of schizophrenia. You know what the manual calls for the symptoms of and the diagnosis, correct?
Yes,
All right, and you also know, and have indicated you testified previously as it relates to insanity and what is required before you make a determination one way or the other as a psychiatrist, correct?
yes,
Now, and you also then would agree with me that as the person that's evaluating Nicole Nachtman at the request of the state attorney's office, who has indicated to you that the diagnosis of that they want a diagnosis of Miss Nachtman, as well as they want your opinion on insanity. You realize and you accept responsibility for having to do a good, thorough, forensic evaluation of Nicole Nachtman, correct?
yes, but the state attorney didn't ask me to give her a diagnosis. They just asked me to do a forensic psychiatric evaluation, which I did do.
And they wanted you to do what as a result of the forensic evaluation? Land wherever you land?
No, to see whether or not she met the criteria for insanity. That was actually, yes. that
And
was-
looking for insanity, you're also gonna look for, I'm not to quibble with you, but
No.
the first prong is mental illness or mental defect, which means you're looking for some type of diagnosis to see whether she has it or not, to see whether she qualifies under the first prong, correct?
In every forensic evaluation, that's what I'm looking for. Yep.
Okay. Now,
Good job. What is the point
as
here?
we indicated, you spent approximately 14 hours with that client. I think it's to Mr. Terry, you had no reason to quibble with the 14 hours, correct?
No, that is correct. But I don't have any reason for that.
Why are we quibbling at all? I don't want to quibble.
Now, did you actually ask Ms. Nachtman whether or not she had had any hallucinations?
No, I don't use the word hallucination because most people that you're evaluating don't know the word hallucination or what it means. I ask, have you ever seen or hear things that other people can't see or hear? That's sort of how I
Mhm.
started out. And then I might ask more specific things based upon what they're telling me. In this particular case, given that I knew about these screams, I asked directly about that. But normally that's the question I usually ask.
I prefer that actually.
Well, at the time, you had the benefit of, let me ask you this. You testified that you did not think that Nicole suffered from either hallucinations or delusions, is that correct?
Correct.
You had the benefit of knowing that there were several people, friends and family members, that indicated to you that not only would they see Nicole talking to herself or mumbling to herself with and without a computer, and you actually also had the benefit of knowing that she had actually had conversations in front of family members where she would be looking at a chair and staring at it. You had the benefit of that, did you not?
No, that is not true. I was told, or I read that she was looking down and mumbling to herself one time. I've never spoken with anyone who has ever said that she was talking to herself, and no other depositions have I ever seen and read someone describing what I would consider to be hallucinations.
Bam.
Do you recall reading Eric Lear's deposition?
Yes.
Okay, and you recall that he actually said that she was talking out loud and looking over to the side and going like this and talking, and then she would say, okay, but she wasn't doing that. That she was looking down and talking to herself or talking under her breath. Do you recall that?
Let me get to that.
And if you want to refer to where I asked you about that, or Ms. Percy Rivera asked you about that in your deposition starting on page 30.
I don't have my deposition with me. I don't have page 30. And I don't have Eric's deposition with me either. I thought I had taken notes on it, but I don't have his actual deposition with me. The volume of pages is extensive. I have just a few pages.
So it would help her if you would give her his shit. Cranky lady. You're trying to characterize these as hallucinations when
Let me see if that refreshes your recollection.
You'll just read it to yourself.
clearly this lady has an imagination. I have to go clean up dog pee. That's all I smell.
Yes, I've read my deposition in that part.
And you'll agree with me that it appears that you did in fact have the benefit of what Mr. Lair said, Eric Lair said?
No, that's not what this is talking about, Attorney Holt. What that's talking about is I said, if he had said this, then I would say that's a hallucination, but he did not. So that example I gave there was myself making up an example of what I would believe to be a true hallucination, but he did not indicate that in his deposition.
He did tell you that she was talking to herself in the deposition, correct?
Who said that?
Lair, Eric Lair in his deposition. Yes or no? If you don't recall, feel free to say you don't recall.
Eric Lear said that she was looking down and talking to herself. He did say that in his deposition.
Did you ask Nicole about that? During your 3-day interview?
No, I did not ask her about that specific instance in the restaurant.
And did you, when you realized that you were going to call Miriam Lair, you were going to call Joseph Carey Jr., you did not call Eric Lair or George Lair, who were also family members that were available, in order to learn whether or not perhaps they had seen hallucinations or delusions while they were taking care of Nicole for the majority of her life, correct?
I had specific questions for the two people I called. That is correct.
So the answer is you did not call either of those two individuals to get better clarification from them if you had questions about what was occurring, even though you knew that this case involved insanity.
I had no questions about it. That's why I didn't call him for clarification.
Now, you have your DSMV with you. If you would turn to the glossary, please. And
DSM-5.
Glossary of terms, specifically page 822.
Yes.
And you were in the courtroom earlier when Ms. Hersey Fulgara covered this with Dr. Ewing.
The
Of course, one you
DSMV.
had in front of you. You have no reason to
Thank you.
disagree with what Dr. Ewing said was the definition today. Is that correct?
I believe he read it out of here.
You have
Correct.
no reason to dispute that what he read is what's in the book at this point, correct?
Correct.
And you also heard him say that auditory hallucinations can come from either the internal location, some internal location within the head, or some external location. Is that correct?
Yes, I heard him say that. Yes.
And you do not disagree with that, correct?
I do disagree with that.
Can I have a moment, Judge?
Okay. Let's hear what you have to say, young lady.
No rush to go anywhere now, Judge. I'd like to, you had, I think you indicated earlier on direct. You testified earlier on direct that you read, well, you're familiar with the DSM-5, and you also read journals,
Yes.
and you also read publications and all that are certainly cutting edge or to keep up with everything that's going on in your area, correct?
Yes.
I'd like to just show you something and ask you, number one, if you are familiar with this.
The only how I'm familiar with it is because you guys discussed it earlier. I have never read this myself until right now you're presenting this to me.
Would you? I'm sorry, because we haven't had an extra copy. Let me just let Let's take a look at it for a moment.
Absolutely.
Come on, get your shit together.
What I showed you and what apparently you're familiar with us having discussed with you earlier is a Health and Human Services Public Access treatise in the area of internal versus external auditory hallucinations. Is that correct?
You just showed that to me. Yes.
But you already indicated a couple seconds ago that you're familiar with this because we've discussed it previously and you were in here and you heard it, correct?
I heard you talking with, we have not discussed it. I just heard what he had been presenting with Attorney Hersey.
Right, well, let me just let you go ahead and take a few minutes or however long you need to peruse and or read what I'm going to mark as defendant's exhibit number.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on Judge Washington.
Now, what we'll do is we'll take a break in between after Ms. Holt is finished with this witness before we go to a redirect. I think I'm going to interrupt because I just didn't know how long the article was, and it might have been more appropriate to give the jury a break while the doctor is reading the article. So let me just ask the doctor how much more.
It's a 14-page article.
A couple of pages more.
Well, I mean, it's 14 pages, and I'm trying to read through the initial analysis of it.
Ms. Holt, did you want her to read the whole article?
Well, all I'm going to, you want me to approach and tell you what I'm going to ask, and then you can go from there?
I would tell you what, we're going to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a break.
I mean, you gave her a fucking article that she has never read before. And you want to ask her questions about it.
Welcome back. Did anyone discuss the case, do any research related to the case, or was anyone exposed to any media of the case during the last break? No hands. Let the record reflect that there are no hands. Ms. Holt, are you ready to continue cross-examination?
Doctor, just to put us in the perspective of where we were talking obviously about internal versus external auditory hallucinations, correct?
This article, yes.
Well, you and I, that's the subject matter we're talking about.
Correct.
You had already indicated that you don't believe that you can have both internal and external hallucinations, correct?
Correct.
And so that you would be disagreeing with what Dr. Ewing testified to earlier today.
Yes.
And what I asked you to do was read the article that I provided to you, and you have now done that, is that correct?
Yes.
And in this particular article, it does in fact say that auditory hallucinations associated with schizophrenia are phenomenologically diverse. External hallucinations classically have been considered to reflect more severe psychopathology than internal hallucinations, but empirical support has been equivocal. And in fact, it says that you can hear voices both from an external and internal aspect, correct?
Correct.
You still would continue to disagree with that even though you've read the article, correct?
Well, I would disagree with the hearing of internal voices would be a hallucination. I would say that it is your own thoughts. And that's also in the article.
And you agree with me, though, that what we read about a hallucination in terms of the DSM-V, you accept and recognize that the hallucination is defined within the DSM-5, correct?
Yes, it is.
Now, and I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, someone will say this, but you testified that Nicole Nachtman did not suffer from delusions because she didn't ever volunteer to you that she had heard voices, correct?
Can you repeat the question?
You testified that Nicole Nachtman did not suffer from delusions because she did not ever volunteer to you that she had heard voices, correct?
I don't know how those two things go together, delusions and hallucinations.
No, I'm off to another subject.
Okay.
I've got a few more subjects.
I thought you said them both in the same sentence, though. So I'm trying to figure out when you said that question, I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay. You've now testified that Nicole Nachtman did not suffer from delusions because she never volunteered that she had heard voices at all. So hallucinations with voices, delusions in any way, okay? You can disagree with me.
Are you saying I testified to that today?
Have you previously testified that Nicole Nachtman did not suffer from delusions because she never volunteered that she heard voices?
I previously testified that I did not believe that she had delusions of the delusional type that they were discussing in the deposition.
And you yourself never asked Nicole Nachtman the specific question of, have you heard voices, even though have you specifically heard voices?
I asked her the question. I said, have you ever heard or seen things that other people can't see or hear? Then I specifically asked a question about the screams. So those are voices or screams.
Okay. Well, We'll get to that one in a minute, but you never asked her, Nicole, did you ever hear voices at all? Even though you had had the benefit of reading other people's interviews where, for instance, her brother said, she told me she'd been hearing voices.
I did not ask her that specific question, but if I asked Nicole that question, what I believe she would probably say was, of course I hear voices. I'm hearing you talking right now. She would say something like that. She wouldn't say something like how I would be asking it.
That'd be another example of her just really not getting what it is that you were trying to do, correct?
No, I would say she's just peculiar and she's socially awkward and she doesn't understand sometimes when you're saying something, what exactly it means or how it applies. So that's what I would say there.
Which would explain why, when you have in front of you an individual such as Nicole Nachtman, you as the psychiatrist, you as the professional, you as a person that realizes the seriousness of what it is that you're doing, you have to take the time and effort to make sure that Nicole Nachtman was understanding what you were trying to do and ask enough questions and the proper questions to find out really what was going on with Nicole.
Totally,
Right?
completely agree.
Right. It
Yes.
doesn't fall on Nicole Nachtman because she is who she is. And
That's correct.
so during the 3 interviews that you conducted with Nicole Nachtman over the 3 days that we've chatted about,
I've been in
whenever
plenty.
Nicole was talking and describing to you her relationship with her mother,
I've been in plenty assessments with people, and I hate it when the therapist or whoever is assessing the individual uses super big words or terminology that the client doesn't understand. I feel like that is disrespectful and kind of bitchy towards the client just because do you think that they understand what that word means? Ma'am, I barely understand what that word means. So maybe we not use the big words. And I mean, and not to be condescending, but just use regular people words. Like you don't have to use the big college educated whatever words and say it in these ways. You don't have to say it like that. If it says say it like this and I say it like that, that's okay too. If I get the answers required by asking a question a different way that I know the person is going to understand, hey. But lawyers, they're going to pick apart whatever it is you're saying and how you did it and this and that and the third. Good God Almighty. This lady irks my nerves.
is it not correct that she would cry and sob uncontrollably?
When talking about a relationship with her mother was always negative. When she would sob and cry and that type of thing, that would usually be around one of these instances that we're talking about in terms of, the physical assault.
Well, to her, it was like she was living it all over again, correct? I mean, you're saying that it was in response to the 3 incidents, and let's make sure that the record's clear. You're talking about the 3 physical incidents that you previously described, correct?
Yes, yes.
And it was clear that she would become tremendously emotional, even if you think it was inappropriate, because it was too much. But that's the reality. She would become extremely emotional and sob and cry to the point that she was going through rolls of toilet tissue, correct?
Yes, but then it would end quickly too, which is inconsistent with true emotion.
So an Amber Heard.
And that would be because you would direct Nicole Nachtman to another subject at that point, correct?
I would direct to another question, yeah.
Okay. And that's even 4 years after the deaths.
But you
and
still have
well over
the
10 years
emotions that
since at least one of
carries
the incidents
over.
happened, and she still has an extremely emotional response to what it was that she was going through with her mother, correct?
I believe that was a magnification.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes.
You believe it is fair game for a parent to use the corporal punishment of slamming a child's head onto a table. Did I hear you say that earlier?
No, I did not say anything was fair game.
Well, you said it was her style.
Yes.
Okay. You have mandatory reporting obligations under the state of Florida laws as a psychiatrist and as a medical doctor, correct?
Yes.
And are you suggesting that if a young adolescent that you're treating tells you that they are having their head slammed at home for not having good penmanship, that you do not believe that that would rise to the level of mandatory reporting?
What I would have to do is, number one, I would look for physical evidence of that. And then the second thing I would do is bring in a parent and speak with them about the situation to sort of get confirmation about what happened. That's what I would do. So if I then at that point thought that there was significant abuse, I certainly would report that. Yes.
Well, significant abuse is going to be, I guess, in the eyes of the beholder today. If what I just said to you happened and a parent comes in and says, yep, that's exactly what I did because I've been working with my child for a year to get good penmanship, are you not going to report that incident?
If it was one incident and she didn't have any physical sequela from that, I probably would counsel the parent first.
And you said again that it was a style of discipline for Nicole to have been thrown to the floor and kicked by her mother for, again, not acting appropriately. So now we have 2 incidents, correct?
That is a different incident.
Okay, but it's an incident that happened. It's a physical abuse.
That did happen.
Are you suggesting to me that there is a child that you yourself were counseling that if they had their head slammed and had their bodies kicked, that you would not think that that's abuse and should be mandatorily reported?
The first incident of 3rd grade, I probably would report that because the way Nicole describes it seemed pretty severe. The head slamming one, again, I told you what I would do in that situation.
So the 3 physical incidents that Nicole self-reports,
Yes.
put together, although it is limited in the sense of what you and perhaps Dr. Heidi and Dr. Ewing have seen in your realm of experience, to Nicole Nachtman, those 3 physical abuse situations affected her and still do today, do they not?
She still talks about them, yes.
And you would not condone those types of activities for any of the patients that you yourself treat. Is that correct?
Certainly not. Yes, I would not condone that.
And to be fair, because we've talked a lot on direct today, that in terms of Nicole, in comparison to your patients that you treat, it seems like you're distinguishing between them. Clearly, the patients that you're seeing that are adolescents are seeing you because they have a problem in their life and someone has sought to.
Ma'am, why are you
intervene.
yelling?
Yes.
Calm
Usually,
the fuck
hopefully, it's a
down.
parent, correct?
Yes.
If not a caregiver, correct?
Correct.
Some of those individuals may come to you because the school has said something's wrong, we need to do something, correct?
Yes.
Some of those come because perhaps there's been intervention in a court system, correct?
Possibility, yes.
Because not only is there a criminal justice system, but there's also a dependency system where children are taken away from parents for a lot less than these 3 incidents, right?
I don't know
If you
about
neglect them,
that.
if you don't change diapers and things like that, right?
I don't know about all these incidences. I can't comment on those.
Well, I want to get to the
Hypothetical.
point where, I'm concerned with leaving this perception that, well, Miriam grew up with the guys. Her role was the mother of Nicole Nachtman to be the primary caregiver because she chose to gain full sole custody of Nicole, correct?
Yes.
So it's not like Nicole had the option of a biological father in any way whatsoever, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, just to make sure I cover the realm, although Robert Deans was married to Miriam Deans for 11 years, not one person and not one piece of document and not one thing that you've read, seen, or heard in any way indicated that Robert Deans was a significant factor in the caregiving of Nicole Nachtman.
That's not true. In her Florida Air Academy records, he has email correspondence with them. She's on his health insurance. I mean, he's speaking with them on her behalf as her father.
Any record that he ever
I have thoughts on this. I had a stepfather for 15 years. My mom married him when I was 8. And they were together up until, 15 years, whatever. He wasn't a big part of our family get-togethers. He wasn't a big part of my upbringing. He was there. He was married to my mom. Yeah, he took care of me. He provided. He was there, but he was not a like when they sit there and say, oh, well, she had this and she had that and she wasn't at home with him while mom was away. Well, I wouldn't have been either. When I was younger, if my mom was away, I wouldn't have stayed with him. I would have went and stayed with my mom's family. I wouldn't have stayed with her husband because A, I wouldn't have wanted to, just because. And B, that's not his job. That wasn't, I mean, not that he wouldn't have wanted to, I guess, but that's just your girl staying with a stepfather. And again, not that anything weird or unusual happened or what have you, but it's different. It's, you don't, that's the arrangement they had. And, I was really close with my mom's family. That's who I grew up with. So I didn't want to stay with him. I stayed with them. Maybe that's how Nicole was. She wanted to stay with the family. She didn't want to stay with the stepdad. Totally get that. But they're going to paint the picture that he didn't have anything to do with her. Now, my stepdad, he probably wanted to have more to do with me, and I was kind of a bitch. And I was like, no thank you. A skirt. No thanks. But it's whatever. It's awkward. It's weird with step parents. It can go one of two ways. It could be, really great and really wonderful. And then it can be really weird and really strange. So, and not even like really weird and really strange in a bad way. It's just, it is what it is. And not saying again that he wasn't there. He was there. Like, his income helped the household. His being there, he was there for my mom. And if I needed him, he was there. He helped with my first car. He did dad things. Like, it's not that he wasn't there. So, I mean, and whatever. So this lady is annoying.
Intervened in any of the maltreatment whatsoever of Nicole Nachtman that she experienced. Let's just use, certainly not in the third grade because he wasn't around, but that which happened in the 10th and 11th grade. Anyone tell you, or any records show that he ever...
Oh, and he did try to do, like, my stepdad, he did try to, like, be kind of like a disciplinarian at some point, like try to step in and be dad for a little bit. And then I kind of like shut that shit down because I was, again, like I said, I was kind of a bitch as a kid. And then my mom's just like, dude, I'll do it. And so from that point on, he's just like, okay, you do it. and then I just, like I said, I didn't listen to him anymore after that. I mean, we got into it, we fought here and there. So, but he didn't tell me what to do. That was my mom's job. He didn't do that. And if my mom disciplined me, my mom disciplined me. He wasn't going to step in and say, hey, don't do that, because I was her kid. Now, if she was beating me, yeah, probably. But,
ever intervened and sought assistance for Nicole when these things were happening to her. And
There's not any documentation that these things ever happened to her for then there to be documentation that he didn't intervene.
Fair.
He was a nice man, that's what everybody says.
Yes.
That they had met a limited number of times, a handful of times in 11 years of marriage, correct?
Correct.
So if the whole family as a whole had only met him 4 or 5 times, he is not a significant role, is not playing a significant role in this family that is caring for Nicole, correct?
I wouldn't say that. The entire family is sort of dispersed. I mean, they're not all a close family unit. They're all dispersed out. So to say that he had a limited role just because people didn't see him at family functions, I would say that that's not accurate.
Excuse me for a moment, Judge. Judge, if we could approach for a minute with Mr. Terry. Of course.
Sure. Stop.
Court
Don't.
exhibit. Yes.
Ooh, what they got.
Here you go. You can have it. Court Exhibit 4, Judge, we're just going to publish a portion.
Do you need to approach again?
Hold on, no.
So Doctor, what we're going to show now is a 2.22 minute clip of when Nicole Nachtman is talking to you about one of the specific acts of what we call physical abuse
Yes.
in our questions.
Yes.
I don't know, I know science, and really, and this is kind of school, just school, this third grade, you're not worrying about cells and third grade things. It was Holy Trinity, I think. Okay, and this is in Virginia. Yeah. And I guess I kept getting questioned wrong. It was the same over and over. And really all I remember after that is that she got so mad, she started kicking me and punching me and stomping on me. And I remember there's a fireplace across from the couch, and it's a brick fireplace, so it's like there's the corner of the brick fireplace, it's like it keep, poking at your back. And
So you were before, and she was sort of attacking you when you were touching the fireplace with your body. I'm feeling that, that's a sensation you're talking about right now.
yes,
Once you just went over, because you were getting your tongue, she got frustrated, and so she was taking it out on you physically.
yes.
What were you doing, Nicole? When you were laying there getting beat up, as a 8-year-old person, because you're 8 in physical third grade, right?
I don't know, 7 or 8.
Yeah, you're 8 years old. And you're getting beaten up because you don't know the answer to a science question. What are you thinking about just sitting there? What are you thinking?
I'm sorry.
What are you saying?
This is one of the times, that's all.
What do you mean, that's just one of the times, that's all? What does that mean?
Well, no, it's like one of the times, one of the times I remember, because it happened multiple times, but that's one of the times I especially remember.
Why do you think that you remember more than others?
It's someone, I don't understand, yes.
All right, so what we just watched, obviously, is you're asking the questions of Ms. Nachtman, and she's describing to you an area that you've obviously wanted to talk to her about, which is physical abuse.
Yes.
That was a fair and accurate representation of how she reacted, correct?
Yes.
All right, and when she's yelling, when she's saying the words, I'm sorry, it's in response to you saying, what are you thinking, or what are you, in other words, she's like talking to her mother. That's what she was doing, saying to her mother, I'm sorry, while she's getting kicked because she didn't do the right thing. Is that not what that's depicting?
That is what she's doing. She's saying she's sorry to her mother for making the error. Yes.
And then you ask, obviously, why does this stand out as much as it does? Would you agree with me that a child at the age of 7 or 8 years old being kicked for having not known a science question certainly would be something that a child might remember?
Yes.
And I guess I also want to talk to you a little bit about, I've heard you say that Miriam was, I think what you described as growing up among boys, growing up in the military, learning, I guess, or her style is to cuss a lot and things like that.
Yes.
I want to make sure I break these things up.
Sure.
So the fact that she grew up among boys, you've also been able, through your interviews and through your work that you've done with your forensic evaluation, been able to see that there were reports that were being made and observations that were being made both by Nicole and by friends and family members that Nicole maybe wasn't this girly later on in life, and that's kind of what her mother wanted, but
Correct.
So that would be an indication that her mother certainly knew how to distinguish between how, girls and boys might act or how girls and boys might be treated by their parents, correct? I mean,
I don't understand that extrapolation.
well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you kind of lumped her into that she's kind of like one of the guys in the military. And because she grew up in this family where this was kind of acceptable, that it was okay for her to send it back over to her daughter. But the reality was she had the ability. Miriam had the ability to distinguish between her sons and her daughter. This is a girl. You treat girls different.
Well,
Because that's how
yeah.
her family treated her, as a matter of fact. She wanted to do
Well,
all the things
not
that girls
really.
wanted to do, and she couldn't. That's how her mother raised her. Right. That's what all the records show. That's what the testimony of the brothers has shown.
That's what her mom said also.
So then you also said, well, she didn't have this ability to figure out that maybe Nicole was someone that you needed to treat differently. She's a nurse, correct?
Correct. I'm not saying she didn't have the intellectual capacity. Saying she may not have had the emotional insight and
Ability.
the sensitivity that maybe other people might have.
Mhm.
Nurses, one of the qualities of nurses is empathy, correct?
I wouldn't say that's
Not
a general
always.
rule across the board among all healthcare professionals and nurses. I mean, that's not an occupational qualification to be a nurse, that you must have empathy, that you must be touchy-feely and lovey-dovey.
All right, you as clearly nurses cannot go around pushing and shoving their patients, correct?
They do not know. They do not do that.
And so they can't go around calling
Shouldn't.
their patients MFers or effing retards,
Correct.
So
Correct.
she certainly knew how to conform her conduct. Just common sense would dictate to us that she knows how to conform her conduct
In a professional
in
setting,
a professional
yes.
setting.
Correct.
And as a nurse, especially the military nurse, she would have been exposed to probably more types of illnesses, correct?
I don't know that a military nurse has more experience than a nurse at Tampa General. I mean, I wouldn't say that.
Well, they probably see more PTSD, do they not, as a nurse in the military? And if you disagree, say that.
I'm saying that. No, I don't believe so. I mean, I've worked in the VA. I don't believe that PTSD is overrepresented in the hospital population in the military, as opposed to, again, at Tampa General. I mean, we saw the same types of people. The PTSD may have been from sexual trauma or something else, as opposed to military trauma. But I would say that as a population as a whole, PTSD is about 3% of the population, regardless if you're looking in the military or you're looking on the street. So I wouldn't make that kind of judgment.
Miss Dees was married to a person in the military through Joseph Carey Sr., correct?
Yes.
Miss Dees was married to Robert Dees, who was in the military as well as a law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes.
And Miss Dees had 2 children that went into the military, correct?
Which Miss Deans? Her mom?
Miriam Dees.
I don't know about her other son that got killed.
Okay. You didn't know that he was killed while he was in the military in a car accident? You didn't read that in the reports?
I didn't focus on that. I was focused more on why the accident occurred.
You were able to ascertain in talking to, and let me ask this question first. Your conversation that you had with Joseph Carey Jr. in order to fulfill your forensic evaluation data sources, that conversation was 3 hours long, correct?
Yes.
And so during those 3 hours, you would have talked about what his life was like with his biological father, correct?
Oh, no, we didn't talk about that.
What his life was with his biological mother, correct?
I did talk about that. Yeah.
What his sister was like growing up,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, I did talk about that.
When you said that Nicole would spend summers with Joey, she would spend a portion of the summer with her brother at the request of her mother, correct?
And Joey, yeah. I mean, he wanted to see her. Yeah. Mhm.
But it was for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. At least that's how he testified. Did he say anything different to you that you need to share with us today?
It was like an entire month. I mean, that's a large portion of the summer. Yeah.
And during that time period, especially the summer of August of 2015, right before 2015 August, he indicated to you that all these observations of hygiene and the computer and the food situation and the isolation and all those things like that, those were all observations that he was also making. The difference was he was redirecting the sister, correct?
Correct. He had made those observations that summer and the summer prior. Yes.
In looking at the records, were you able to determine that Nicole Nachtman has attended 13 schools through her childhood
I got that information today. Yes.
by moving back and forth between Tampa and Virginia? You've ascertained that, correct?
Today, yes.
And you also were able to ascertain that her mother was being deployed a lot, correct?
Correct.
And all of these observations that are being made from the time of the Air Academy forward in terms of how she changed and became introverted, how she became more shy. The Air Academy saying that she was being bullied, and let me get you to agree to that first. The Air Academy records say that part of what was going on was bullying, correct?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Right. And you also learned that the family didn't really want her to be at the Air Academy. They thought that she should be with them as opposed to a boarding school, correct?
Part of the family, yes. Grandma and the uncles, yes.
And you would agree with me that in your mind, your impression is that Miriam's brothers, Miriam's son Joey, and Miriam's mother were caring individuals for Nicole. I mean,
Yes.
they loved her. They care about her.
That's right. Yeah.
They wanted what was best for her, correct?
Everybody wanted what's best for her. Yes.
However, it was Miriam, as the biological mother, that was making the decisions about how often Nicole would move, correct?
I don't know about that. I don't know what you
Do you
mean.
have any, well, she's the mother.
Correct.
Her going between Florida and Virginia as many times as she did, that's the only person that could have made those decisions. correct?
Yes. I wasn't sure if you meant other types of movement. Yeah.
And the same thing in terms of what schools that she was going to, correct?
Yes.
And did you also learn that Miriam, in fact, did know from family members that they had concerns about Nicole, that they had told Miriam their observations of Nicole?
In deposition, I've read that. Yes.
You have no reason to disbelieve that at this point, correct?
Correct.
And so that, in fact, is, so when we talk about Nicole's self-reporting, the physical part, but there's no corroboration, let me just ask you this. Isn't it true that most battering of whether it be a child or a spouse does not occur in the presence of other people unless it's in the home?
I would agree with that. Yes.
So if Nicole was being battered by Miriam when she was married to Bob, the only person that would have known that was Bob, correct?
Potentially, if it happened in front of him. Yes.
The verbal abuse is substantiated and corroborated by the brothers, as well as by Joey, as well as by Nicole, correct?
Yes.
And in the Air Academy, when you were saying that, Bob, there's some emails between Bob Deans, and we can't talk about the content of them,
Yes.
there is no indication in those records that either Miriam Deans or Bob Deans did anything about the bullying that Nicole was undergoing at the Air Academy, correct?
That's not true.
Who did? Which of those two individuals went to the school and did something about it?
They didn't go to the school. They wanted her to be moved from this girl. They were notified of it. They wanted her to be moved, and they were notified that she was moved out of the room.
And she continued to be bullied, and she continued to have inappropriate behavior there, correct?
Yes, she continued to have inappropriate behavior.
Over a 2-year period.
Yes.
And so the one thing is she got moved from one child to another to separate these two kids.
Correct. That's what the documentation shows.
Yet those two kids still were at the same school together, correct?
I believe so.
And as a matter of fact, it's a boarding school, correct?
Yes.
And by any chance, do you know how big the boarding school was in terms of how many kids there were?
I don't. I just know in that squadron there was like 29 or something with her.
Why didn't nobody ever do anything
So it's
about
not
the
like
other
what
one?
you talk about in FSU where people get lost because there's thousands of people. This is a
That's
smaller
right.
school, smaller setting.
Correct.
She's still being exposed to whatever it is that is, whatever it is. Because right now, if I asked you, was she suffering from the beginnings of mental illness, what would you say?
Oh, certainly. These personality disorders that I've talked with you guys about today, they're certainly manifesting and starting to show as a teenager, and they go through adulthood. I mean, certainly at that time, it's becoming evident that she has those. Yes.
And as we sit here today, do you agree that genetics plays a role in mental illnesses or defects?
Certainly. Yes, I agree.
And were you aware that on Miriam's, the mom's, well, Nicole's mom, Miriam, that one of the brothers was discharged for for depression?
I did not know that.
And did you ever talk to Ronald Nachtman, Nicole's biological father?
No, I
Yourself
watched the
directly?
videos
You did watch
and
the
I read the deposition.
And would you agree with me that you made observations of Mr. Nachtman that you felt were indicative of some type of behavioral? You're not supposed to diagnose people just off of a video, so I'm not asking you that, and I don't want
Correct.
to draw an objection. But you certainly made certain observations from watching the video and reading the deposition, correct?
Oh, yes. And reading the psychological evaluation in the court file. Yep.
You won't draw an objection from them. That's your witness.
In your opinion, can a child at the age of 3 or 4 be affected by physical abuse that is occurring in their presence? not to them, but in their presence?
I would say no.
And so when people talk about that abuse is a cycle, family to family, generation to generation, at what age is a child affected by the physical abuse that is occurring in a home?
I would say when they can remember it. And I specifically talked with Nicole about that. And she said her first memories are when she's in 3rd grade. So she doesn't recall anything before age 8.
Now, you also learn in reviewing of the records that Miriam took, Nicole's mother,
Yes, that's what I'm
Miriam Dean,
assuming. Yeah.
took steps, evasive steps to ensure that Nicole's biological father could not have any interaction with her, correct?
Yes.
And you also learned as a result of a review of everything in front of you that you had available to you, that Nicole knew that she was not to have interaction with her biological father, correct?
Yes.
Would it not make sense to you that she would have been given the basis for why that contact had been terminated?
Yes. And that's documented in the Florida Air Academy records.
And again, although I'm trying not to be repetitive, all of that was because of allegations against each other of all kinds of aspects, correct? Between her biological mother and biological father, correct?
I thought the reason was because he had taken another child.
Oh, he took another child and he couldn't take care of
Mr.
this
Nachtman's
one?
rights to that child was terminated to Nicole, correct?
Yes.
Now, when Nicole comes back, well, let me take you to London for just a minute.
Yes.
Did you learn as a result of your long conversation with Joseph Carey that really the transportation plans as well as the cost of these summer trips were all covered by Miriam? In other words, she would make the arrangements, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So again, it would make sense that Miriam would make the arrangements, and I mean, Mrs. Deans
That's
would
right.
make the arrangements for Nicole to travel to London, correct?
Yeah, she made the arrangements.
And based on, I guess, what you indicated on direct, that you have experience, a little bit of experience in the studying abroad. When you study abroad and you're sending these 17, 18-year-old kids abroad, the school takes a lot of steps to ensure that there's some type of containment of the kids in order to ensure for their safety, correct?
I believe so.
So usually what that means is they send them to a particular university, correct?
Yes.
Sleep in a particular place.
Yes.
They go to a limited number of classes, correct?
Yes.
They're afforded an opportunity to get some type of meal plan.
Yes.
And although you have some freedom, the reality of it is this: the school assumes some responsibility for their safety, correct?
Some, yes.
That's not to say that Nicole didn't leave the building where she had classes and go buy food somewhere,
Right.
but it is a much more structured than when you head out to the big campus of Florida State University, correct?
I do not believe so. No, I don't believe that there's more structure in the location in another country than there is on the campus of FSU.
And when you go study abroad, they have all the classes pretty much always in the same building, don't they, as opposed to where you travel across the campus?
I don't know that. I tried to ask Nicole about some of that stuff. She didn't really tell me about that.
What she did tell you, though, was there was a significant difference between what she was experiencing in London and
Emotion.
how emotionally,
Yes.
and how Florida State University hit her when she went there, correct?
Correct.
And if these signs of deterioration, or if these signs such as the hygiene,
I feel you,
and not,
Judge.
following through on things and
You're trying to
not being
pull
able to
something out of this
self-correct
lady
yourself,
and you're
all these
not
things
getting
started
it.
happening somewhere,
And so you're getting
after London.
frustrated, ma'am.
You would agree with me.
I would
that
not.
When Nicole returned home, whether it be for Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer, if Miriam Deans was living in the same home with Nicole, that she should have made these observations, correct?
I would believe that she would make those observations, or Nicole's behavior changed when she was around her mother because she knew her mother had certain standards.
Well, but we have the brothers that say that even when they went to visit Miriam and Bob and Nicole at the home that they lived at, that she still was disengaged from the family. So
Or
you have
that was
independent
just
proof
her
or
behavior.
independent testimony that's saying she was as she was and she didn't change.
That's her personality style. Yes.
Okay, now you're calling that her personality style. You realize other people are calling it the mental health deterioration and the signs of schizophrenia. You understand that there is a difference here in these opinions, correct?
Yes, I understand that there's a difference in opinions.
Because when I think about personalities, I think about my outgoing
The
personality.
objection was sustained.
Right. So when we talk about these things, you have to acknowledge that Bob Deans and Miriam Deans were having to watch and see the same things that the Lear family were seeing.
I
Correct?
believe they were, yes.
And there is no evidence that either one of those two individuals took any intervention on behalf of Nicole subsequent to London, even if we don't talk about her
Easy from
childhood.
the outside
Subsequent to
looking
London,
in.
There's no intervention, correct?
It depends upon what you mean by intervention.
Was there any mental health counseling?
Well, there was no mental health counseling.
Was there any evaluation?
Yep.
No, but Miriam was trying to intervene by enforcing certain rules, providing certain clothes, trying to make Nicole look more appropriate to other people, trying to teach her how to act appropriately to others, trying to demonstrate that, trying to teach her that this is the way you need to act in order to be more liked among other people, because she knew it was a problem Nicole had. She didn't go to get things psychiatrically because in her culture, that's sort of not accepted in a Puerto Rican culture. But she was trying to do what she felt that she could do to make Nicole more acceptable and get the things that she wanted out of life. That's what she was trying to do. So those are the interventions she was making. Because they weren't psychiatric doesn't mean that they didn't exist.
Dr. Lazaro,
Yes,
Nicole Nachtman has never in her life been obese, correct?
I don't know that. Well, she was,
Was she
no,
obese at the time that her mother had her have liposuction against her will?
I don't know what her weight was at the time.
100, you want me to- 132 pounds.
I would say she was overweight, but not obese.
Do you feel that liposuction against someone's will is something that should happen because you want them
No.
to look different?
No, but Nicole did not tell me that was what happened.
But you've had significant records, including a 52-page report from Dr. Heidi, where all sorts of things were spoken about, correct?
Correct, but
But
even
let me
her,
ask you this, ma'am, you wear glasses, correct?
yes, I do.
By choice.
100%. Well, I mean, I need glasses. Yeah. I mean, they're bifocals. I need them. Yeah.
And again, Nicole expressed to you the fear she had about having anyone touch her eyes, do anything.
Yes,
May seem trivial to some people, but for Nicole, that was a real fear, correct?
that's right.
And again, because her mother wanted her to look a certain way, that was going to have to be the choice that Nicole had to live with, correct?
I wouldn't say it was just due to looks. There were other practical things that even Nicole had talked to me about that were talked about in relation to the surgery.
Whatever the practical things were, the bottom line is Nicole did not want the surgery in theory, correct?
That's right.
And at 25 years of age, at 21 years of age, I'm sorry, again, she's an adult, and because her mother wants something, she has to do it. You acknowledge that the mother was controlling?
I do believe she was controlling because she felt that she had to be, because she didn't feel that Nicole could handle things without her intervention.
How does liposuction help or LASIK help Nicole with her hygiene?
I don't believe that either of them help. Well, I mean, the LASIK could help with hygiene. You don't have to deal with the glasses, but I don't believe that was the reason for those.
How does liposuction or LASIK surgery in any way help her navigate better at Florida State University in terms of not sleeping all
Move,
day,
bitch. God
being on the
damn.
computer all night, and
You gotta
missing
be
classes?
so
How do
angry,
either
but
of those
you
two things help her in that area?
steady
Her mom didn't know
standing in
about that.
front of the
Nicole was covering
camera.
up her grades. She was telling her everything was fine.
Hygiene was consistent for how many years? And what you're suggesting here today is that the mother did not in any way know about the hygiene problem?
I don't know how she looked whenever she was with her mother. I really don't. I do know that when she was not with her mother, when she was at college, that's when it seemed to be the worst, when there was nobody overseeing her.
The reality of it is that unfortunately Miriam Deans traveled a lot because of her work, correct?
That's right.
And again,
And unfortunately, Miriam Deans is not here to tell you
you don't have
What
any
the fuck
personal
happened?
knowledge
Because
of
she's
Robert
dead.
Deans actually
Because
saying to Nicole, hey, Nicole, every day
her daughter
you're
killed
with
her.
me, you got to take a bath. None of that exists.
I have no knowledge of that. Correct.
You also have family members that have said that they brought these things to Miriam's attention. And they talked about how
God,
Nicole was
right.
needing help, correct?
That's what they said, yes.
And yet the help didn't seem to come through, not according to Julie Holt, according to the family.
I agree with you. Yes, that's what they report in depositions. Yep.
I don't know which defense attorney is worse, her or the other lady.
And you would agree with me that
They're
the
both equally
significant, that the
bitchy.
verbal abuse is significant in Nicole Nachtman's mind, correct?
Yes, due to her personality style, she was particularly sensitive to negative feedback.
You indicated on direct that you were abused
Ugh.
at some point at work. Can't remember which one you said.
Yeah, I alluded to that in medical school.
Okay.
That's sort of the way we're trained.
Okay, and
She reminds
did
me
you
of
like
Daphne.
that treatment?
Not
No.
Daphne.
However, you're a
Velma.
strong enough person to fight back for that, correct?
Well, I did what I could.
Oh, I mean, you do, you know.
Well, I mean, I have a strong personality, as you might know.
Saucy. She's saucy. And this
As a
lady
matter of
doesn't
fact-
like it.
Nicole Nachtman's mother would encourage her to take laxatives and pills, over-the-counter pills, in order to affect her weight, correct?
Her mom taught her about laxatives. Nicole took it upon herself to get the over-the-counter diet pills.
Well, let's just stick to the laxative then.
Okay.
Do you
Oh,
think
okay.
that is an appropriate thing for a mother to do? Again, with a child that, or again, with a daughter that does not have the wherewithal to oppose it. Do you think that's an
Laxatives
appropriate
would
thing?
be
I don't think it's
awful.
appropriate for an adult to do that to a child, no, because there's a lot of medical things that could be caused due to that. And a child's not going to
That's
understand
gonna upset your
that. So I would say,
tum-tum.
no, that's wrong.
You should not do that. You're pooing on yourself.
Now, although we debated a little bit whether it's screaming or voices or whatever, Nicole
Oh,
did report
or
to
whatever
you
now.
hearing sounds like a high-pitched flat line, at least since she returned from London, correct?
Yes.
Her ears popped on the plane. She had tinnitus, I think is what it's
And
called.
although you don't believe it to
Here.
be true that Miriam Dees would kill Nicole, Nicole has been consistent in saying that she feared that her mother was going to kill her for a significant period of time, correct?
No, for a significant period of time?
That's not what you said.
This incident happened 4 years ago.
Oh, I thought you were talking about at the time of the offense, if you're saying a significant
a
period of time
fear-
before that.
It was a fear that she had at the time based on the verbal abuse, based on the physical abuse, based on whatever had created that fear, and it has stayed consistent through 2019, correct?
Her report, yes.
You acknowledge that during your interviews of Nicole, she would go off on tangents and you would have to redirect her, correct?
Yes.
You believe that Nicole displays inappropriate affect, correct?
Correct.
You believe that she's depressed and sad and unhappy
Now or prior?
prior and
Yes.
now. Yes?
I would say prior, yes. I wouldn't say now, yes.
Nicole appeared to have a lot of anxiety around her because of the manner in which her mother engaged with her, correct?
I believe it was due to her personality style, that she has a nervous personality style, which is avoided.
Isn't that true that most parents,
feel
if
you,
they know
Nicole.
that their child reacts poorly to yelling and screaming, if they want to make a difference in having that child hear them, that they will find another way to talk to them?
Most parents, you said?
I hope so.
You qualified it with most parents. You said, I hope so, but unfortunately, my clinical experience, that is not the case.
And that's because you're seeing people that have problems,
Correct.
just like Nicole Nachtman, correct?
Well, some of them do, yeah.
You cannot argue that her grades show from the first semester to the very last 5 semesters, a constant decline in grades. You
Right.
cannot argue against that, correct?
I'm not arguing with you on that. No, that's correct.
You can't deny that Nicole, even when you were talking to her, has talked to you and told you she feels empty. She has a chronic feeling of emptiness, correct?
She didn't say that. That was my impression.
This lady's angry at
You
her.
also have observed yourself personally, the unusual mannerisms and bizarre behavior that Dr. Heidi observed in Nicole, and you totally agree that those observations from Dr. Heidi that she testified to actually existed and continue to exist when you interviewed her, correct?
Not bizarre behavior. She is odd, but I never said that she had bizarre behavior. I believe Dr. Heidi was using that description to talk about how she believed Nicole was in the police interrogation video as bizarre. I don't agree with that.
I feel you, Dr. Lazaro. You You are keeping your
Now, Nicole
cool.
told you
and
that she
being
opened all the windows
snarky.
in the house so she could escape when her mother came home, correct?
Yes.
Then why didn't you just leave, man?
And Nicole also told you that she heard a noise, she heard like a trash bag or a ruffle, and so she assumed that her mom was in the home and she panicked, correct?
Yes.
And that's consistent with one of the photographs that shows not only Miss Dean's purse, but a bag that was found right next to it in one of the photographs taken by a crime scene technician, correct?
Correct.
Nicole also told you about her mother finding her with a gun and pills, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then her mother asked her, do you need help? Nicole said no. And then her mother took her to learn how to shoot the gun, correct?
Yes, when she got home.
You've also heard Nicole talk to you about the suicidal thoughts that she has had, correct?
On the day of the incident, the first incident?
So,
Or otherwise.
so in close proximity to the incidents, correct? She
She
talked
did
about
say
having suicidal thoughts.
Correct, she did say that.
Having a gun and having pills, sleeping pills, could be a red flag for suicidal thoughts, correct?
Certainly, that's why her mom asked her if she needed help.
And did you feel it was
Certain.
appropriate for the conversation to end there and for her mother to tell her how to shoot the gun or show her how to shoot the gun? Do you think that was the appropriate response? Because Nicole said no.
I do not believe that was the appropriate response. I do not know that that happened, but I do not believe that would be an appropriate response if it did happen.
If it happened, it's not appropriate, correct?
Correct.
She wanted to teach her gun safety.
And it's also
This is
true
what you
that
do with a
individuals who
gun.
are contemplating
That's
suicide.
what you do not
quite
do with a
often
gun.
Vacillate, go back and forth, and it's something that they struggle with sometimes for maybe years. Is
Certainly.
correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Again, as a part of a mental illness, correct?
Doesn't even have to be a part of a mental illness. It could be just, again, as we've talked about, a personality disorder that and I guess that's considered a mental illness. So yeah,
So I guess I better make this clear. You are agreeing with prong one of the insanity.
yes.
Okay. Now, when,
Oh, somebody had their phone on. Row McGee.
now I believe you previously testified, I'm getting a little mixed up if it was today, that Joey would tell you that his mother would tell him at the end of a phone conversation, I love you.
I was in my deposition.
Okay, so you previously have testified that Joey told you that, correct?
Yes,
But to say it in person felt awkward.
correct.
And so there's no reason
See, saying it
or
on the
evidence
phone
for you to
sounds
believe
awkward.
that in any way
Saying it in person sounds fine.
Miriam Deeds treated Nicole differently by telling her, for instance, I love you on a daily basis, correct?
Can
So
you,
that just seemed to be Miriam Deeds' style.
could you repeat that for me?
Right.
He's a gentleman.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm going to take you back for just a moment when I talked to you and asked you a question about whether or not Nicole indicated to you that she just felt hopeless and dead and empty inside. And let me just show you something to refresh your recollection. I think it's either starred or highlighted, and to see if that helps you, your recollection.
whatever
In
they were
terms of
going to
whether or not
ask,
Nicole said
she either
That was after
forgot
she
it.
killed her parents. So that's different from her natural feeling throughout the rest of her life. This was after she killed her parents. That's how she felt hopeless and dead and empty inside.
Huh.
So I need to ask you if you ever were provided by the state what is evidence as the state's exhibit number 70, and I'll just put it in front of you for a minute. I think it's something like 200, a little over 200 text messages.
I never received this until I'm just now looking at it. I know it's been alluded to in another testimony.
And I think, I think what you're referring to is where, hey, call me, or hey, I'll send you money, or hey, that kind of testimony.
That's
Is that
what,
what you were remembering?
yes.
Would it surprise you that in all of these text messages, there's only one time the word love, and it's from Nicole Nachtman to her mother, and no response from the mother?
Would it surprise me? Is that what you asked? Yes.
Well, if you want to peruse through this in any way, but I'm going to keep asking some questions
Sure.
because it is introduced into evidence. Would you agree with me that there was not an emotional bond between Miriam Deans and her mother? And Nicole Nachtman?
Would I agree that there was not an emotional bond?
Yes.
No, I would not agree with that.
The offering of computers and money, food, shelter, things of that sort, those go to the responsibility a parent has to care for the child, correct?
You would hope that a parent would care for their child that way, that well. Yes.
The other part
Yeah,
of a
I don't have
parent's
to provide you with a
responsibility
laptop.
is ensuring that a child has self-esteem, correct?
That's the parent's responsibility?
Nope.
Well, do you believe that we're born genetically with self-esteem?
Yes.
Okay, and so that self-esteem can be destroyed by a person physically and verbally abusing you, correct?
Could be affected, yeah.
And would you agree with me that it is not a parent's responsibility to do that to a child,
To do what?
To do what?
to ruin their self-esteem that they're biologically given,
It's not the job of the parent to do that, if that's what you ask me.
to destroy it, you mean, or to affect it or something? Is
It's
that what-
not
I
the
wanna make
job
sure
of a
we're
parent to
agreeing.
destroy their child's self-esteem. I thought that's what you asked me.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure we're agreeing on.
Yeah, so I agree on
Now, since you've been talking about personalities, in your conversations with Joey made it very clear to you that his personality and his self-esteem and his self-worth are different than Nicole's, correct?
that. I didn't really talk with him too much about his own personality.
Well, you talked to him for 3 hours.
Yeah, I did
Talked
talk.
to Nicole for 14 hours.
Yes.
Is there not a significant difference between the two children?
There is a significant difference. Well, there is a difference between the two children. I mean, there's very basic, that different sexes, and they're different ages.
I
There's a lot of
appreciate that, that's not
differences.
what I mean. So he comes across more self-confident, correct?
He comes across as honest and genuine. Yes.
Comes across more self-confident, correct?
I would not say that he was self-confident. That was not something that would project out to me, no.
He doesn't seem to have any problems with self-esteem, correct?
I did not perceive that he had problems with self-esteem.
He's successful in the military.
I don't know how he's doing in the military. I imagine he is successful. He's been
He's
there
a
for a while.
captain. Did he not talk to you about where he is?
No, this guy is a humble man. No, he did
Okay.
not.
If he's testified being a captain in the service, you would agree that that's successful, correct?
Yes,
He's married,
yes,
so that means he has the ability to create relationships, correct?
yes,
He has 2 children, correct?
yes.
Did he indicate to you that he's raising his children differently than he was raised and Nicole was raised?
We did not talk about that.
So you didn't ask that question, knowing the dynamics of not only the Lair family, the Dean's Nachtman family, and the fact that we had insanity and battered child syndrome in this case?
What I was trying to find out from him was exactly looking at the insanity issue and looking at how Nicole was, in his opinion, what he saw, her behaviors and things like that over the course of time that he knew each other, more specifically around the time of the offense. That's what I was looking at.
And you would agree with me that a layperson has no idea what psychosis is, correct?
A layperson does not, right?
And you would agree with me that a layperson, that as a layperson, he certainly observed the changes in his sister, correct, over time?
Yes.
And that those changes had concerned him, correct?
He didn't talk about it as a concern, but he did tell me that he had done interventions with her. Yeah, while she was with him. I mean, he loves her.
Okay, the interventions that were done were, hey, go take a bath, you stink.
Correct. He was making rules for her because he knew she had the capability.
Those are
of doing these things, but
interventions.
She was not doing these things. So he gave her rules to follow in his household. That these are the behaviors
In a
appropriate
layperson's
for somebody
term,
in our household to be doing.
those are
You previously
called
testified
ADLs.
in August of 2015 that you agree that Joey told the police that Nicole was terribly afraid of their mother, correct?
Wait, reverse. What did you
You
say?
have previously testified that Joey told the police that Nicole was terribly afraid of her mother, their mother, in August of 2015. You've previously acknowledged that, correct? In the deposition.
Okay.
Said that to law
I
enforcement.
thought you were saying I testified in August 2015.
No.
Okay.
Yes,
He said that to police.
yes.
Yes.
Did you talk to Joey about why he chose to live with his grandmother and his uncle that was living there on and off during the time period of his high school years?
He volunteered to me.
Don't tell me what he said. Just say,
Okay.
did you talk to him about it?
He volunteered that to me. Yes.
And again, that was even though he had his biological mother and biological father still living, correct?
Yes.
Did you testify on direct that you see that Nicole is weak and that any person could see that, correct?
I don't know if I said weak. I thought I said meek.
Meek. She said meek.
As it relates to the battered child syndrome, first of all, you've made a correlation between battered child syndrome and battered spouse syndrome. I'd like you to direct me to some type of publication or some type of of article or something, or the DSMV that says that those two
DSM-5.
things are in
Stop
any
calling
way
it that.
related to each other in the same sense of a cycle of violence.
I don't have any publications or anything that would alert me to that.
As a matter of fact, you previously testified that Dr. Kathleen Heidi is the renowned expert in the area of battered child syndrome, correct?
That's right. She's a world-known expert in that. Yep.
And you have acknowledged that don't remember the exact title, but talking about the development, the maturity development tool that's used by Dr. Heidi, that number one, you don't use it, correct?
Yes.
You're not trained on it, correct?
Yes.
However, she has used it for 40 years, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, most individuals in the world of psychology, in fact, are aware of that instrument, whether they use it or not. It's in the psychological testing world, not psychiatric world, correct?
I have spoken to several friends that were psychologists when I had this issue before to try to figure it out, and they said no.
So the judge has been pretty good on no hearsay.
Okay. So you asked me about psychologists. So.
It's a psychologist testing instrument, correct or not? It's an instrument used by psychologists, absolutely not used in the world of psychiatry.
Dr. Heidi's not a psychologist. She's a licensed mental health counselor.
I know that. So does the jury. They heard that yesterday.
Okay.
The question is it not used in the field of psychology? And if you don't know, you don't know.
I'm not a psychologist, so no, I would say I don't know.
So you agree that children or kids who suffer from battered child syndrome, there's usually a pattern of family violence.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes. Do you agree?
That in children with battered child syndrome, there's a family history of violence? Is that what you said?
You agree that kids who suffer from battered child syndrome, there's a pattern of family violence, page 164, in case you get Mr. Terry.
Is this is from Dr. Heidi's list?
The question is, you said battered child syndrome does not apply in this case, correct?
Correct.
You don't think that Nicole Nachtman's a battered child, even though we've talked about the physical and verbal abuse.
Correct.
Didn't rise to the level of the violence that you think is necessary or the verbal abuse that you think is necessary, correct?
Correct.
Do you agree that kids who suffer from battered child syndrome will sometimes exhibit the following characteristics? A pattern of family violence, yes or no?
Yes.
They use or attempt to obtain help from other people but fail,
Yes.
or no?
Yes.
Their efforts to escape their family situation fail, like running away, suicide attempts, yes or no?
Yes.
The youth is isolated from other people, yes or no?
Yes.
Home life becomes increasingly intolerable, yes or no? Or yeah or no?
The home environment becomes increasingly intolerable. Yes.
The youth feels trapped and helpless.
Yes.
And that a child who suffers from battered child, the parent's death frequently is perceived as relief to them.
Yes.
And I found what it is. So it's the level of personality development. You previously testified you're not an expert at this interpersonal level of maturity theory, correct?
That's correct.
And so you really can't make too much of an opinion about what Dr. Heidi is saying about that because you don't know enough about it. You previously testified to that, correct?
Yes.
So I might have them. Oh, I'm sorry. I had a couple, two or three more things. Just a couple.
Sure.
Areas, real quick.
Sure.
You indicated on direct that you have been published.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many times, and can you share with me the subject matters?
I believe 3 times. One is about a schizophrenic person and the treatment that was given. He had the article, I believe, is entitled something about the auto amputation of the penis. He had cut his penis off. This was a patient of mine due to psychosis. That's one. Another one was medical consequences of crystal meth, making crystal meth. That was another patient of mine. And then the other one is about juvenile sexual murders.
And where was that article published?
I don't remember the journal right now off the top of my head.
And when was that, if you can recall?
This was after I left my fellowship a couple years, I think 2010.
And when we were talking about the associations that you belong to, there's also on your CV that you pay fees for federal and state controlled substance purposes.
What?
You pay fees in order to, or to the federal and state government dealing with controlled substances.
I don't understand what that
Do you
means.
in any way dispense medication?
No, I used to. I used to.
As a psychiatrist, you no longer dispense medication, is that correct?
I prescribe medication. I thought that what you're talking about, because I was doing Suboxone treatment in my office for some patients, I actually had a Suboxone dose in my office, and I had to, the government came in and checked and made sure I had the right medicine and stuff. That's what I thought you were talking about. Otherwise, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, no, it was on your CV, so I just wanted to clarify what it is.
It was? I would like to see it. I don't, I don't remember it's on there, but
So I want to talk to you a little bit real quickly. Dr. Heidi has been seeing Nicole since August of 2015, correct?
yes,
You really kind of saw her all the way through probably January of this year, correct?
yes.
And you've indicated that there hasn't been a diagnosis by the jail. Mental health evaluations by the jail are done once a year, correct?
No,
By the jail, not by us, by the jail.
no, I'm saying no to that.
And how often do they do those mental health evaluations?
As needed. So when she originally came in, she was seen, I believe, every day for an
And during
extended
that
period of time.
And during the time period, initially, they were talking about that she was in a suicide, you remember that she was in a suicide suit?
Right. That's purely because people that have committed crimes like that in a specific age, we have a protocol in the jail that if people meet certain criteria, they automatically get put in a suicide cell because they meet certain criteria, and the risk is very high just getting into jail. So that's standard. Yes,
And that Nicole, in fact, did talk about having heard voices initially, correct?
exactly. I said that. She reported this screams, the same thing.
And again, the people at the jail, so she's in lockdown, correct?
Well,
The people around her are like Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office employees, and they wear uniforms. So she knows there's law enforcement all around her, correct?
right. I mean, she's in a single cell. She's in a suicide gown, and people are monitoring her and make sure she's okay. Yeah.
And Dr. Ewing testified today that one of the real problems facing Nicole is, number one, she herself doesn't want the stigma of having a mental illness, correct?
Yeah.
And that's what he testified to, correct?
Yes.
And that doesn't bode well for her prognosis in dealing with the schizophrenia that he has diagnosed her with, as has Dr. Heidi, correct? You would agree with that. Not that you agree with schizophrenia,
Yeah.
but you agree that that would be a bad prognosis.
Well, it's a bad prognosis for any psychiatric illness. If they don't agree that they have an illness and they're not accepting treatment, then it's a bad prognosis for any illness because they're not going to get treatment for that illness. It's the same thing with diabetes or anything else.
So I just want to make sure, so it's consistent with what Dr. Ewing has said, that Nicole has not been diagnosed by someone else, or because they haven't done a forensic evaluation of her as you and Dr. Ewing and Dr. Heidi did. Their evaluation is different, is it not?
They are doing a clinical evaluation like I would in my office outside of this forensic setting, which is a clinical examination for treatment.
And the jail cannot force medication to Nicole Nachtman, correct?
No, she asked for medication at one point.
Yes, I'm getting there.
Okay.
That was her depression.
Okay, I heard it all.
Well, she said actually what she told me was that she wanted to get up earlier because she was sleeping.
Listen, I heard it all. She's talked about she had a client that cut off his penis. Listen, this dog done pissed again, even though I had taken her out. Lord Jesus, have mercy. Okay. You can still diagnose somebody with schizophrenia even if they don't want to tell you they have schizophrenia. It's not something like, oh no, I don't have schizophrenia. You can still figure it out. Just because she didn't say, oh yeah, I have it. Come the fuck on. God, you're
Sleeping all
annoying.
day.
Why don't we go by what the records say? What did the record say? That they did that because she was still hearing voices, she had to sleep, and they thought she was depressed.
And they're on.
Due to hearing voices. She was given that medication because of her reports of. Let's see.
And again, her reports are then supported by whatever it is that the jail personnel are seeing, correct?
Right. And I've also said that she had a mood problem at that time. Yeah, that's not an issue. Yeah, that's what they're giving her medication for. She appeared to be depressed in the context of the situation. They started her medication to see if that would be helpful to her. And it was, at least Nicole had reported initially that it was.
And one last question.
Yes.
There's a period of time, were you aware of the period of time where Miriam Deans and her son Joey did not speak for 2 or 3 years?
Yes, I know that.
And yes, suicide watch is
Without telling me what Joey
Protocol.
said or didn't say about that. You would agree with me that a parent and a child not speaking for 2 or 3 years is fairly significant, correct?
I don't know if that's true.
could be, may not
So
be.
Miriam Deans is not lovey-dovey, according to you. She's not that kind of person. She won't talk to her son for 2 or 3 years for whatever reason. And you believe that that would be indicative of someone who could nurture and develop and care for someone such as Nicole Nachtman?
I don't know how you're making that extrapolation. I don't know how those two equal each other.
You can just say no. because
I don't know based upon what you're saying. I don't know how you're making those two connections like
If
that.
she didn't talk to Joey Carey Jr. for 3 years, 2 or 3 years, who is successful in life, who she sends her daughter to every summer, who is married and has his own children.
What does that have to
Again,
do with
how
it?
can
You
that
don't know
type
why
of
they're not
person Be
talking.
good for this type of a child, Nicole Nachtman.
Judge, I'm gonna object to the relevance.
Hold on.
I don't understand.
Wait, no, wait.
Oh,
There's
sorry,
an objection right now.
So we're gonna try to rephrase.
Yeah, please rephrase. I guess we're retreating from the one last question.
I'm trying.
I tell attorneys never say that because it's never true.
I will do better next time.
It's all right.
So you acknowledge that Miriam Deans did not speak to Joey Carey Jr. for 2 to 3 years.
I've read that, yeah.
Well, you read it, and had you wanted to talk about it with him, you could have in that 3-hour conversation, correct?
Certainly could have. I was more focused on Nicole. Yeah.
Joey is one of 2 children that Miriam Deans had that could talk to you about what the relationship was between a mother and her children in that particular family setting, correct?
Yes.
And if Joseph, you'll agree with me that Joseph Carey Jr. seems to be well adjusted to life and doing fairly well.
Oh, yeah.
You'll also agree with me that in August of 2015, Nicole Nachtman was not well adjusted and not doing well in life for whatever reason.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
And if Nicole Nachtman knew that her mother did not talk to Joey for 2 to 3 years for whatever the reason was, do you not think that that would have an effect in how Nicole Nachtman would perceive her mother and her failures in life?
I don't know.
Her mother and her mother's failures, or her mother and Nicole's failures? I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, everybody's talked about Nicole's perceived fear of her mother.
Correct.
If you don't talk to your own son that's doing well in life for 2 or 3 years, the child.
Do you
who
think Nicole has
lost
a
her bike, the child
comprehension?
who's got failing grades, the child who can't take care of herself, the child who all the roommates have discussed, in their opinion, these are people that barely knew her. She could not navigate herself through Florida State University's day-to-day activities. That person, you think, would not be in fear that those failures would impact her relationship with her mother?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that.
Thank you very much, Judge. I'm done.
Redirect?
And I'm gonna agree, don't worry.
I don't have any problems.
Careful.
You mentioned earlier, there was some discussion earlier about Nicole, Nachtman, some people talking about her mumbling to herself, how she might be looking down on the computer and kind of working, she's saying stuff, sometimes couldn't tell. Doctor, is it common for some people to talk to themselves, to work things out?
Yes.
With a person with the avoidant personality disorder that you described, is it even more common for people like that to do that?
I wouldn't say it's more common. I just think it's common among people to do that, to talk to themselves, to work.
I talk to myself all the time.
And when it came to the liposuction, did Nicole ever tell you she was forced to get it?
No, she didn't say that.
And in fact, what did she told?
Would you stop moving around?
Laura Hessemer, what did she tell?
Gosh dang it.
You changed it. No, that's it.
What did she tell Laura Hessemer regarding the liposuction?
Let me get to that.
If you also refer me to a page, so
I don't know what the page is. Oh, it's page 23 on Laura's deposition.
Thank you.
She had it when she was younger because she was a lot heavier. She told me that she had it done. She lost a lot of weight. She felt a lot better about herself. She felt lighter and she could actually eat.
And that's what she told Laura regarding liposuction.
Yeah.
Now, regarding the glasses, do you know whether Nicole liked wearing glasses?
I don't believe she liked wearing glasses.
Judge, that calls for speculation, and based on the answer, I think that's appropriate.
Well, I'll caution the witness not to speculate.
No, Nicole told me that, Judge. I'm sorry. We
Well,
talked about that.
Let's be clear.
We talked about that specifically.
What did she tell you specifically? She liked wearing glasses?
She didn't like wearing glasses because she likes to exercise and she felt like that was, sort of getting in the way of that. And she really wanted contacts was one of the things that she really wanted. She didn't want to go through the exam where they do that blow of air on your eyeball, the ocular pressure exam. So it took a long time for her to get contacts because of that.
The police interrogation video, what you described earlier, I believe, with Ms. Coles, that you found that she would not display any symptoms of schizophrenia or psychosis in the police interrogation video. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Because she was not psychotic in the interview. She was not attending to anything else than what they were speaking about. She was answering the questions. She was in the here and now in the conversation. There was no evidence of psychosis in that interview.
Just very briefly, Judge.
Well,
Doctor, if you could, do you still have that portion of the deposition Laura has regarding the liposuction?
Yeah.
If you could just finish reading the entire, I guess the entire paragraph of that.
Okay.
There's just a couple more lines.
I only have one quote of it. She can actually eat. But then she was like, it's still not enough. She had to wear weights.
Judge, that's good.
all right, may the witness be excused by the state
Yes, sir.
and the defense? Thank you, doctor. You may step down. The ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am going to send you home for the evening. I am going to instruct you not to discuss the case amongst yourself or with anyone else. Also, not doing research related to the case, and please avoid any exposure to any reports about the case. I am going to ask Miss Allison Ballister to stay behind so we have some discussion. I think you had indicated you might have a conflict, so we're going to discuss that with you. The rest of the jury may be excused. All rise for the jury. Jury's exit. Everyone may be seated. Ms. Ballister, you can have a seat as well. Doctor, you can step down. You're not going to interfere with us packing up your stuff and walking out. Ms. Ballister, the Deputy Oliver indicated to me the other day, and I shared it with the attorneys, that you indicated that you were leaving tomorrow at noon, I believe, on vacation.
Instruction adequately explains premeditation. There's two
We didn't get to
paragraphs.
hear that she's leaving on vacation.
On first-degree murder for premeditation, adequately conveying what the Supreme Court has determined should be told to the jury as far as what the definition of premeditation is. And it's just the state's position that that's adequate. The standard jury instruction should be given. And
Yep.
there's no need for a proposed special instruction in this case.
So I just want to put the two cases I cited, which are Beaufort, 617 Southern 2nd, 1046. It's a Florida Supreme Court case from 1993. And Norton, 709 Southern 2nd, 87. Again, a Florida Supreme Court, 1997. Both cases hold that a defendant attempting to conceal a crime or taking steps to conceal evidence of a crime does not establish that the murder was committed with a preconceived plan or design. Efforts to conceal evidence of premeditated murder are likely to be as consistent with efforts to avoid prosecution for an unlawful killing. And we're asking that the jury be instructed as such.
And Judge, my only response to that would be that that's case law. That's not.
So it's not necessarily that they're proposing an inaccurate statement of the law.
Well, I believe that that's what's stated in case law. What's stated, there's plenty of things that are stated in the opinions in case law that are not a part of the jury instruction.
No
And that's
question about
my
that.
only response.
But I mean, what I'm trying to get at is if they were to make that argument, you would not be able to stand up and object to the statement of the law.
If they were to make that argument to the jury.
Right, during closing.
No, but I don't think that I would agree that us arguing case law to the jury is necessarily, appropriate. We should argue the facts and evidence and how it pertains to the instructions that the jury is going to be given.
Well, but one of the objections that's common during closing is misstatement of the law.
Absolutely.
So but if that's whether it's case law or whether it's statutory law, I want to know whether it's in fact the law.
If you're asking if Ms. Hersey argues that to the jury in closing argument, just kind of as a general based on the facts we have here, you're not going to see that in the standard jury, that kind of thing. No, I wouldn't object to it because I agree that is what the law says. I just think that the standard jury instructions, the Supreme Court has said this is what we believe the jury should be instructed on as far as what premeditation is. And they have not chosen to include that, even though it is a part of case law.
Right.
So I don't believe it's
Right. Anything else from the defense?
No, sir.
I would not sustain an objection that it's a misstatement of the law, but I do believe the Supreme Court has given us standard jury instructions that cover the definition, and they have never chosen to add that additional factor. And there's no cases; those were not jury instruction cases.
Yes, sir.
They're just cases that assert the law. So you're free to argue it, but I'm not going to instruct it. I'm not going to change the standard.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jury
Yeah.
instruction adequately explains premeditation. There's 2 paragraphs in the standard jury instruction on first-degree murder
Okay.
for premeditation, adequately conveying what the Supreme Court has determined should be told to the jury as far as what the definition of premeditation is. And it's just the state's position that if that's adequate, the standard jury instruction should be given. And there's no need for a proposed special instruction in this case.
So I just want to put the 2 cases I cited, which are Hofert, 617 Southern Second 1046. It's a Florida Supreme Court case from 1993. And Norton, 709 Southern Second 87. Again, a Florida Supreme Court, 1997. Both cases hold that a defendant attempting to conceal a crime or taking steps to conceal evidence of a crime does not establish that the murder was committed with a preconceived plan or design.
We already read
The
that.
premise to this was that everybody was in agreement, but I'm not comfortable with just that. I want to flip through each one of them. I also want to go over the verdict form
Yes.
specifically.
We went over that as well, the verdict form, Ms. Siri and I.
I appreciate that, Ms. Summer. So welcome aboard. Starting at 2.7, closing argument. If you want, if I just read them, if you can just put on the record, no objection.
From both sides, Judge, or
Let's do it. Yeah.
sure. That's 2.7, no objection from the state.
No objection from the defense.
3.1, introduction to final instructions.
No objection.
No objections.
3.2, statement of charge.
No objection from the defense.
No, the camera's not off, lady.
Next, I have 7.1.
You want to take her jacket
which
off?
is a lesser as to count 1, 7.
Child syndrome and only limiting it to Miriam, because the initial hearing, our contention was we were going to attempt to have that. I don't want to waive
She
that.
took her shoes off.
We are formally requesting a self-defense instruction on Robert Beans, although we know the court's previous ruling from the hearing.
And just, the only thing I would put on the record is that we, of course, have always objected to the self-defense and battered child syndrome coming in.
Oh,
But again, based on your court's ruling, we agree that these instructions are correct, legally correct.
All right, and I just want to make note that the battered child syndrome is at the bottom
Yes, Judge.
of that. So it is.
The defense and I kind of talked about that, and I think we're okay with the way it reads, since they're legally supposed to be read together.
Right, you have to have the self-defense.
Okay.
Yes.
How icky. She took
Next, I
her
have
shoes
3.7,
off.
plea of not guilty, reasonable doubt.
It's
No.
stamped.
Out the defendant testifying.
Yes, sir.
So we'll be ready to
Was she
go.
playing a game again?
And Ms. Hersey Fulvera had filed 2 motions asking for the special jury instruction on battered child, and I understand the state's position.
You should
that
stop
based on
doing
the
that
court's
crazy
ruling,
hair
so I understand
lady.
That's granted.
Right.
I also filed an actual requested instruction with just that. The other one that
Okay.
she filed.
We're done. They're just fighting over jury instructions. And we don't even get to hear it all. I don't even really understand them all. I liked that doctor. And while she doesn't diagnose her with schizophrenia, she diagnosed her with some personality disorders. Which, again, so not on the spectrum. Which, okay, that's fine. Like I said, I am not an expert, but I also forget that those personality disorders are out there floating around. So those also are considered in the DSM-5. I mean the DSM-V. Another thing. But she was real spicy, and she was getting on the old lady's nerves. It was funny. That was funny. But okay, so then they're going to go into closing arguments and then jury instructions and then they're going to do a verdict. And then we shall see what happens to Miss Nicole. I say guilty. I haven't even looked ahead. Are you proud of me? I haven't looked ahead. We're going to find out together. So, Nana and a boo-boo. We're going to find out together. Okay. Well, like, comment, subscribe, all of the things. And the next video will be the last video on this one. It will be closing arguments, verdict, and that's the end. And it will be all of it. Don't think I'm going to do jury instructions because, well, we're not the jury. We don't need to hear that. It's fine. It's about 47 minutes worth of yeah, I I mean, we could listen to them on high speed, but I mean, it's just, I don't know, we might. But the defense's closing is a whole hour. But I guess the prosecution, they do about 40 minutes, their first half. The defense is an hour, and then they do about 40, I can't read that. About 48 minutes their second half. So, yep, that'll be that. And then the verdict is only like 8 minutes long. Because, you know, they're always fast. The trial takes forever and it's 15, 16 videos long. And yet the very end of it comes to 8 minutes. It's very anticlimactic. But anyway, okay. Like, comment, subscribe, do those things. I will see you on the next one.